His skin and flesh were torn open by the barbs on the scimitars. It was a ghastly sight. Just as Ramlin was about to retreat, Orgrim counterattacked. Under the sunlight, the heavy hammer of destruction shone with a black light as it spun. There was no technique involved, only speed. It was unbelievably fast. It was insanely fast. It was a speed that surpassed what Ramlin could capture with his naked eye. In less than a blink of an eye, his slightly slender body was split in half by a single powerful blow, as if he had been chopped by an incomparably huge machete. Time seemed to have frozen. Ramlin's chest and lower body were still floating in the air, but his abdomen that was hit instantly exploded into a rain of flesh and bone, exploding in the direction of the hammer's strike. After what seemed like 3 seconds, Ramlin's eyes, which were still filled with disbelief, fell into a pool of blood along with his eyeball. Killing with one strike, domineering. Next, Orgrim's loud voice was no different from a drum in the orc's ears. Another flag was thrown into the field. A minute later, another wound appeared on Orgrim's shoulder, and another corpse appeared on the ground. Next, it was the same killing with one strike, the same voice, and the same tone that never changed. But with the corpses of the 3 tribal chiefs as the foundation, Orgrim's shout had a different meaning. The tribal chiefs who thought that they were the weaker ones replied with silence. At this moment, there was no longer any hope in their hearts. Even though the orcs who were watching were all fired up. There was a short silence among the people who were qualified to participate in Tmekegra. Half a minute later, the 4th flag was thrown. 3 minutes later, the 5th flag. 10 minutes later, the 6th flag. By the time the 7th flag was thrown into the arena, Orgrim was already covered in blood. No one could tell if it was Orgrim's blood or his enemies. None of the 6 tribal chiefs had a complete corpse, all of them had turned into bloody chunks of flesh. From an unknown little chieftain to the chieftain of a clan with tens of thousands of people. The challengers were leveling up step by step, and Orgrim's injuries were worsening as well. Now, anyone who went up had to weigh their own strength first. When the 7th flag was thrown, a black-skinned orc without a left hand came out. Below his left arm was a long scimitar. It was not because he lost his left hand in the war, but because he was a warrior of the Broken Palm tribe. As one of the cruelest and fiercest tribes in the tribe, the Broken Palm tribe's tradition was to cripple their left hand and replace it with a sharp blade. They were prepared to go through fire and water for the tribe's glory. Orgrim, you are indeed powerful, but your path as a great tribal chief will end with me, Cunud Bladefist. The tribes were also divided into different ranks. Chapter 201. The crowd had thought that they had reached the peak a long time ago, but who would have thought that after Orgrim's words, an even higher peak that seemed to have appeared out of thin air behind that unsurpassable peak. The sound waves reverberated in the sky for hundreds and thousands of times. The entire tribe's camp, and even the entire land, were shaking violently. What kind of heroic spirit was this? As long as one's life was not spared, the bloody battle would not end. Not long ago, no one looked favorably upon Orgrim, the assistant of Black Hand. But now, every single beastman had a different view of him. His gaze was filled with intense admiration. No, this was no longer admiration, it was worship. Orgrim, Orgrim. The roars of thousands of beastmen stirred up the emotions of all the beastmen in the tribe's camp. Although the beastmen in the distance could not see what was happening, they could hear their leader's voice and knew that perhaps a new great chieftain was about to be born. Cunud pounced over. Orgrim said that he looked down on Cunud, but in his heart, he put in 120% of his effort. No one from the Broken Palm clan was easy to provoke. The Broken Palm clan originated from the beastmen who were enslaved by the ogres. This group of beastmen were imprisoned by the ogres in a huge, rough, and incomparably sturdy circular arena as gladiators. Every day, they would fight non-stop to entertain the ogres and other, higher races. This was the sole purpose of these beastman gladiators' existence. The ogres promised that as long as any beastman slave killed 100 beastmen in the arena, they would obtain freedom. Cunud's brother, Kargith Bladefist, did it. However, what the ogres gave Kargith was not freedom, but the fate of being imprisoned in an underground prison that never saw the light of day until his death. Kargath was imprisoned in the underground prison, his left hand secured to the prison pillar by a steel handcuff. In order to break free from the handcuffs, Kargath chose to destroy his own left hand. Kargath led the Beastman slaves who also chose to give up their left hand and use their sharp fists instead. They fought like the slaves of Spartacus before Duce's transmigration against the Roman Empire. They killed the ogres who had enslaved them. Kargath carried the head of the ogre leader and announced the formation of a new clan. A clan that yearned for freedom and fought for it, the Shattered Palm clan. Therefore, this batch of Shattered Palm tribe's orcs were all super elites who had killed their way through mountains of corpses and seas of blood. Just one charge from Cunod was enough for Orgrim to realize that this wasn't an opponent he could deal with unscathed. Oh 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 oh! The boiling sound waves surged into the sky and seemed to cross countless light years and the endless void to reach planet Draenor. He withdrew his left hand from the scimitar and kicked away Canard, who was about to lose his life and become a corpse. Orgrim raised his fists and roared for the 7th time. Who else? Orgrim looked at the faces of the strongest existences in the Horde, Grom, Kilrog, Samuro. With his body riddled with scars, Orgrim dared to say that he wouldn't have more than a 50% chance of winning against any one of them. But it was impossible for him to back down, and he would not back down. This was not only because of his life and his glory, but also because he felt that he was shouldering the last request of his good friend, Durotan. He shouldered the heavy responsibility of leading the tribe to a path of survival in this strange and unfriendly world. Apart from the passion in his eyes, there was only clarity. Orgrim's godlike eyes scanned the faces of the experts in the tribe one by one. There was no provocation. All he saw was obedience. One of the experts lowered his head. 2 of the experts lowered their heads. When Orgrim saw Samuro's face, Samuro punched his chest with one hand. This was the etiquette for meeting the great chief. Kilrog and Grom looked at each other. Kilrog said, "My saw that Orgrim shouldn't die here. I won't sacrifice my life for an irreversible fate." With that, Kilrog bowed as well. Grom said, "I am very satisfied with my position as the Warsong tribe chief." With that, he bowed as well. At this point, the second great chief of the Horde was born. Chapter 202. Caer Daroshire, northeast of the Hillsbrad Hills. The Barra family's castle was located on a beautiful island surrounded by water. The beautiful Lake Daromir was the castle's most beautiful scenery, and also the best moat. The southern side of the island was relatively flat, and this was where the essence of the Barra family's industry was gathered. Large blacksmiths were connected to each other, and thick chimneys were constantly emitting black smoke. People came and went on the island, and the merchants' caravans were endless. On the western side of the island, there was a large port that was clearly not for civilian use. Duce actually saw a small warship here, which was obviously used by the Barra family to protect their home. The island was not completely separated from the shore. There was a 200-meter-long stone bridge that could accommodate 4 carriages side by side that connected the island to the shore. The lake was not deep, and the water was about 2 meters deep, allowing people to see the bottom through the clear water. Of course, there were at least 10 cannons on the fortress that protected the entire Barra family's castle, and their muzzles were facing the shore. If someone really led an army to kill their way through the narrow mountain road, it would be a real live shooting practice. No one from the attacking army would be able to cross the bridge alive. Duce stood on his horse on the shore. If not for Duce's transmigration, this prosperous island would have become a deathly silent and terrifying place in a few decades. The entire Barra family would have been destroyed, and this place would have been occupied by Kel, Thuzad's cursing sect. It would have become a very famous place in the future, Skalamence. Duce would never forget how he and his companions were wiped out time and time again in the game. He could remember every single point after they were wiped out. Duce suddenly sighed. "Master, what's wrong?" Makarov asked Duce attentively. "Nothing, it's just a little boring." At this time, one of Duce's private soldiers rushed back. "Report, there seems to be some trouble ahead." Makarov suddenly frowned. "Didn't we already inform him that His Excellency would come to visit?" "That's right, but a caravan suddenly overturned their carriage on the bridge. dumping a large amount of goods and attracting cattle, sheep, and animals. Now the only bridge to the island is blocked. The Barov family said they were very sorry and asked us to wait for a while, the private soldier said. Makarov's face was as dark as ink. What about the ferry? They were all sent out before we made the announcement. What mistake? This was clearly a show of strength. Master, Duque didn't mind at all. Instead, he laughed. Ha! Barov and his men really think we're beggars. I'm going to blast those guys on the bridge. Makarov was furious. He waved his hand to summon his private soldiers, ready to rush over and push everything in their way into the water. No need. Duque pointed his horsewhip at the castle on the island. I want to tell Barov that before I became a duke, I was first a powerful mage, and Stormwind is not dead. Pass the order, change the horseshoes. Horseshoes? Horseshoes could protect the horse's hooves from cracking, but horseshoes were only used in a world of ice and snow. Fortunately, the troops came along the edge of the snow-covered Alterac Mountains, so they were prepared for horseshoes. It didn't take long for the horseshoes to be changed. Meanwhile, in Barov's castle, Alex Barov received a report from his subordinates. They stopped. They stopped before they even got close to the bridge. Let's leave them hanging. I don't mean to humiliate them, but I don't want to see this young duke opening his mouth. In troubled times, food is very precious. At that moment, hurried footsteps came from outside the door. It was another of Barov's personal attendants. They're here. Duke Marcus and his men are here. Barov frowned. His personal attendant rarely lost his composure. If it was a normal arrival, he wouldn't have made such a fuss and run over breathlessly. Moreover, Duque had used some kind of unexpected method to cross 100 meters of water. They're here? How did they get here? Ice? That Marcus froze the lake. Hearing his subordinate's report, Duke Barov quickly left the room and went to the other side of the castle, which was a terrace close to the bridge to the south. He saw a scene that he would never forget. Above his head, the warm sun. In front of him, a kilometer of ice. Darlong Mill Lake, which Caer Darrow Castle relied on as a barrier, was completely frozen. A group of people galloped on the slippery ice, heading straight for the castle. The rumbling of the horses alarmed countless people who were working on the island. Not far away, Duke Barov saw that his guard captain was stupefied. He clearly held the alarm bell in his hand, yet he didn't know whether to ring it or not to ring it. Fortunately, at the last moment, the captain saw Duke Barov. The Duke heaved a long sigh and made a beckoning gesture. The captain was relieved. Open the gate. Welcome, distinguished guest. In fact, in order to pretend to be in a hurry, the gate was always open. However, having guards lined up to welcome him was completely different from not having guards lined up. As if he was waiting for the guards to line up, the moment the Barov family's private army finished lining up and blew the welcome horn, Duke arrived. Duque knocked on the horse's belly, and a tall, pure white steed galloped over the frozen lake. At this moment, Duque did not look like a mortal at all against the backdrop of the falling snow. He wore a white mage crown with purple patterns on the top and a white stormwind robe with blue edges, fluttering in the wind. At his waist was a belt brimming with a baleful aura and exuding a mysterious blue arcane radiance. At his waist was a strange ornament faintly flickering with lightning, which was even more dazzling. The pure white cloak he wore fluttered in the wind and snow, and the golden rune patterns embroidered on the cloak could be vaguely seen. Although he looked like a gentle and elegant young man, he gave people the feeling that he was a god who walked out of the snowstorm. Stepping on the ice, Duque's warhorse neighed even more. However, this appearance startled Duke Barov, who came out to welcome him. Next to him, Makarov grabbed the reins of his horse, jumped off lightly, and immediately announced, Duke Marcus, the court mage of Stormwind, the Duke of Karazhan, the destroyer of hundreds of thousands of orcs. Next to him, for carriages were lined up. Duque's private army quickly opened the boxes in the carriages. 2 carriages of golden bars, and 2 carriages of frozen orc heads. Duke Barov's eyelids twitched. Chapter 203. Duke Barov was not young. In his life, he had seen many different kinds of people. There were thieves, bandits, trolls, and nobles. He had never seen a person so domineering and overbearing. But he was not blindly domineering. At least he came with wealth. Give my friends wealth, and give my enemies death? Narrowing his eyes, he looked at the long carriages behind Duque. Even if he did not want to admit it, Duke Barov had to say, "This little guy is well prepared." Recalling the information on Duke Marcus, the boy who rose miraculously, Barov felt a headache. He was too young and his status was too high. If Duque was a title passed down from his ancestors, Duke Barov could still treat Duque like a junior. But obviously, Duque was not. Last summer, at the age of 14, he was selected to become a magic apprentice at the Storm Royal Magic Academy in the East County Abbey. In the same year, at the admission ceremony, he became an official Earth mage with unparalleled talent and rejected the request of Medivh, the guardian of Azeroth, to take him as a disciple. Later, it turned out that Duque was right, because he was sensitive to Medivh's demonic aura. That was not all. In the next few months, he single-handedly conquered a small Naga clan from somewhere and controlled nearly 10,000 murlocs. He opened up a route between Stormwind City and the Western Wilderness in one fell swoop, and opened up a Pearl route that earned tens of thousands of dollars a day. But there was still more to come. When Medivh was controlled by Sargeras and opened the Dark Portal, Duque, who was only 15 years old, fought his way into Karazhan with the famous Anduin Lothar, killed Medivh, and kicked Sargeras into the bottomless abyss. After that, whether it was burning 100,000 beastmen, luring and killing the tribal chief, or using a huge ice ship to rescue 50,000 Stormwind Kingdom's elite soldiers, everything Duke did could be called a miracle. Unfortunately, there were a lot of witnesses and material evidence for everything, so there was no room for any falsification. No, it should be said that the scene of the frozen sea was witnessed by Duke Barov himself. This was indeed, that's amazing. Master Marcus, how did you seal the lake's surface with ice? How is the energy output of the ice elemental realm balanced? What about magic coordination? A spell? Is it purely the ice element, or is it combined with the arcana element? Hearing the familiar female voice beside him, Duke Barov felt a headache. Sorry, I'm so excited. I haven't introduced myself. I am Janice Barov, mistress of the Barov family. Of course, before that I was a sky mage. The junior sister of Dalaran's archmage Antonidas. The elegant lady sold Duke Barov out completely the moment she opened her mouth. That's right. Magic first or husband first? Was there a need to ask? Of course it was magic. If you lost too much before sitting at the negotiation table, no matter how much effort you put in, it would be looked down upon and disregarded. He wanted to pry open the Barov family's treasure chest and take out the most valuable thing in the treasure chest, food. First, he had to grasp the Barov family's weak spot. If he could not do this, any groveling, kneeling, and crying would be meaningless. Unless he led an army to rob it, he would not be able to get a single grain from the Barov family's granary. Fortunately, Duque knew what to do next. Of course, before that, Duque gently activated his magic circuit. This was definitely a common thing among mages. Many mages liked to continuously absorb the elemental molecules in the atmosphere and even gradually condense the pure magic power into better circuits to replace the old or broken circuits in their bodies. But what Duque did was a little exaggerated. In just a second, Duque had scanned all the magic traps within a 300-meter radius with the system elf. Lady Janice could clearly feel that in that instant, the magic traps and magic circles that she had originally controlled all deviated slightly. It was not that she did not want to regain absolute control of these magic circles, but the magic circles seemed to be afraid of her and cowered away from her. She suddenly realized that as long as Duque wanted to, his uncontrollable power would dominate and take over everything in an instant. Chapter 204. For a moment, Janice tried to regain control of everything and regroup the magic traps in a short time. But the Princess Barov soon gave up, feeling a disagreeable sensation which was at once familiar and strange to her. God, Duque, you remind me of Antonidas. This old brother of his makes me feel so helpless. Even though Janice had her hands on her hips and was lecturing a junior, Duke Barov was still shocked to hear his proud wife compare Duque to Antonidas. Just now. Duke Barov could not hide the shock on his face. The magic defense system I painstakingly set up was seen through by him in one glance. Not only here, but also those in your dormitory. I told you, with my level of skill, I can only defend against petty thieves. I can't defend against a true master. In front of a true archmage, setting up such a clumsy magic trap would reveal the location of the trap in advance. Janice scolded her husband without holding back. Sorry, I was hit by the magic trap and overreacted. Duque raised his head slightly. There was a lightning magic trap hidden on top of the gorgeous chandelier. As long as Janice willed it, or pressed a switch in a secret passage at the side of the corridor, the entire 20-meter-long corridor would be baptized by lightning. Duque's sincere apology made Duke Barov even more embarrassed. All right. Our guest must be hungry after coming all the way here. Let's eat first. In the beautiful dining hall, Duque, who was sitting at a long table that could seat 10 people, fell into a new dilemma. Western etiquette was quite complicated. Unfortunately, Duque's understanding of it was limited to holding a fork in his left hand, a knife in his right, and not talking while eating. Then, when Duque saw the elegant butler place a large number of spoons and forks of different sizes beside his plate, Duque was dumbfounded. The habits of nobles were quite troublesome. If he took the wrong thing, he would be looked down upon. Duque didn't have the chance to cram on this knowledge. Similarly, because he didn't have this knowledge in his head, the system elf couldn't save him. When Duque felt the Duke and Duchess looking at him, Duque suddenly felt glad that the Duchess was a mage and quite obsessed with him. Did you know? Mrs. Barov, in fact, low-level spells are very helpful in training one's multicasting ability. Oh! Janice's eyes lit up. This was multiple casting. Countless people had practiced metamagic abilities for a long time without being able to develop any. But everyone knew that a mage who was good at casting multiple spells could definitely take on 2 or 3 mages of the same level. Janice had also heard some rumors about Duque. My teacher is Huojia, the 100-handed reaper. In fact, I learned the rarest way to train my multicasting ability from my teacher. Since we hit it off so well, I might as well introduce you to each other. Oh, my little Duque is the best. Hurry up and teach me. If I really learn it, I'll help you bully my old man at the negotiating table. As soon as she said that, Duke Barov's hand froze in the middle of reaching for the spoon. He had always known that his wife was a magic maniac. Back then, Janice, who was beautiful and noble, was absolutely loved by everyone. Thinking back to the time when he, handsome and elegant, finally plucked the Dalajan rose with all his magic treasures, it was something he was proud of for decades, both for his feelings and for his career. He didn't expect that after decades, because of magic, for the first time, he would feel like he was tricked by his wife. Duke Barov was really speechless. Don't worry, dear, it won't be too hard for you. Janice symbolically comforted her husband and then looked at Duque without blinking. Duque made an apologetic expression to Duke Barov and then activated Hands of Magic. When the 12 Hands of Magic appeared, they simultaneously helped Duque tie the napkin, cut the food, swirled the wine, poured it into his mouth, and wiped his mouth with the napkin. After a series of dazzling magic performances, who would pay attention to whether Duque used the right spoon or knife? Duque even instigated, Duchess, you can start with the 2 simplest hands of magic and let the 2 additional hands of magic help you complete the actions of daily life. After a while, you'll find that you can easily multitask. Hands of Magic was, of course, the simplest level 0 spell. It was when a mage focused all their attention on one hand of magic. When using 2 or 4 hands at the same time, the mental power required was completely geometrically increased. But it was undeniable that this method could indeed train one's ability to cast multiple spells. Seeing that his wife was easily bought over, Duke Barov also looked helpless. Soon, this somewhat ceremonially ridiculous meal was over. To Duque's surprise, Duke Barov actually agreed to immediately start the negotiations in the afternoon. Originally, Duque thought that Duke Barov would deliberately give him the cold shoulder. In a private meeting hall, the lights were brightly lit. Duke Barov sat on one side of the conference table. Beside him was a secretary, and behind him stood 2 guards who were obviously experts. On Duque's side, there was only one attendant, Makarov. Duke Barov clasped his hands together, his chin resting on the back of his fingers. He immediately got to the point. Duke Marcus, I have to admit that I have underestimated you. Your talent in the field of magic is unparalleled, and your wisdom is also evident in negotiations. Janice is my darling, and her pressure forced me to open this negotiation in a passive position. But I hope you understand that personal feelings are not the main factor in this negotiation. The Barov family does have the food that Stormwind urgently needs. Chapter 205. In this era, there were no video recorders. No matter how good the magic mirror spell was, it could only transmit current events, which was to use magic to make a live broadcast. It was also affected by distance, elemental fluctuations, and a series of other factors, making it quite unstable. If one were to say that recording a certain event was in the realm of the bronze dragons, who could control space and time. Among the humans, even the most famous astral mage, Mediv, only had a deep understanding of space. What Duque was doing now was completely beyond Duke Barov's imagination. 3-dimensional projection. Before Duque's transmigration, the true meaning of holographic projection technology had not yet been formed. But the wise and far-sighted humans had already built a huge triangular cone made up of 4 triangular pieces of glass, and through the combination of projections in 4 directions, it became a true 3-dimensional projection. Duque's system ELF also extracted Duque's knowledge in this area, and replayed the memories imprinted in Duque's mind in the most 3-dimensional and realistic way. It was the Battle of Red Ridge Mountain. Duke Barov only saw, in the projection, a green tide suddenly surging from the other side of the mountain. More than 10,000 orc warriors surged from the mountain passes and mountain ridges towards the human camp. He only saw a huge orc among the orcs raise half of his body and roar towards the sky. His braided hair spread out in the wind, and together with that shocking roar, it was awe-inspiring. The orcs were split in 2 amidst the rumbling of the earth. This terrifying green tide drowned the entire mountainside in a few blinks of an eye. The surging tide was sniped by the arrows shot by the human fortresses, but it was meaningless. Instead, it aroused the orcs' ferocity. They turned into the most terrifying destructive demons, easily attacking the fortresses, using the most brutal method to break through the thick mud walls, and dragging out the humans hiding in the fortresses and tearing them to pieces. The scene changed, and showed the orcs attacking the eastern and northern walls of Stormwind City. They also did not care about their lives, using their flesh and blood to resist the rain of javelins and ballistae. The green tide drowned the walls. Unknowingly, Duke Barov's entire back was soaked in cold sweat. Is this thing real? Can you demonstrate it again? Can I ask my wife to watch it? Prince Barov asked 3 questions in a row. Duque only had one answer. Sure. In fact, when Duque replayed the scene, Duchess Barov, who had rushed over after hearing the news, was even more shocked. One was an orc, and the other was a magician. However, Lady Janice managed to suppress her curiosity in the field of magic very well. Dear, I have to say, this should be true. Duque calmly said, in fact, I also prepared an orc warrior as a captive. I put him to sleep. However, you can let your guards test the strength of the beastmen. Of course, you have to be mentally prepared for the sacrifice of your subordinates. Duke Barov nodded gravely. Half an hour later, Prince Barov and his wife returned to the negotiating table with ashen faces. The results were too shocking. Even though Duque had repeatedly emphasized the strength of the orcs, Duke Barov had sent 5 fully armed men to deal with an unarmed orc, and Duke Barov's side had paid the price of 1 dead and 2 seriously injured to kill the orc. But those damned orcs can't pass through Solder Bridge. Duke Barov argued. Solder Bridge, this huge stone bridge that connected the 2 continents, was indeed a natural stronghold. Duque was also quite speechless about this huge cable bridge. This should not have appeared in a world that seemed to be set in the Middle Ages on Earth, with magic and swords as its core. Don't forget, planet Azeroth was the experimental factory of the Titans of Creation, so a lot of black technology was set aside. At least when the dwarves already had steam-powered tanks, humans were still using swords. Of course, those huge tanks were also unreliable. For example, their endurance was terrible, and they would collapse after 1 or 2 kilometers. This did not stop the people here from having all sorts of strange confidence. Duque did not directly refute. He just quietly took out a rough map of the northern continent of the Eastern Kingdom, pointed lightly, and then drew a line from right to left. Duke Barov had already admitted defeat in his heart, but he still did not give up. He finally asked, "Are you sure those green beasts can drive the ships?" Duque nodded silently. Even though the Horde's ships looked like a huge pile of garbage floating on the sea, and he could not agree with the orcs' crude and terrible aesthetics, there was no doubt that the Horde's ships could indeed pass through the sea. Duke Barov and his wife did not look very good. What Duque had just pointed out was the hinterlands in the east of the northern continent. The Horde would disembark from the coast at the easternmost part of the hinterlands, at the bottom of the Seaview Cliff. From east to west across the entire hinterlands, they would arrive at the Barov family's territory. The Barov family was indeed huge, but it was a pity that they were geographically long. From South Shore in the southwest, all the way to Caer Darrow in the northeast. In a sense, if the Horde really invaded along the route Duque had pointed out, the Barov family would also act as a barrier for the Alterac royal family. Attacking in advance or setting up defenses would also be troublesome. After all, most of the hinterlands was covered in dense primeval forests, and that was the territory of the trolls who had been fighting against the humans for 1,000 years. Even after spending 1,000 years, the humans still could not completely eradicate the trolls from the hinterlands. The scariest thing was that Duque also said, "I bet that when the Horde can't cross the Sodder Bridge, they will look for other routes. The hinterlands will be their first choice. And the great chief of the Horde will definitely do everything possible to pull the trolls into the Horde's camp. So by next year, the Barov family will very likely have to face the Horde's allied army." This time, Duke Barov and his wife were completely at ease. The Barov family was indeed wealthy, but military affairs had never been their strong suit. They had always had a complementary relationship with the Alterac royal family. But after seeing how strong the Horde was in the mountains, the Barov family no longer had any hope that the Alterac kingdom could withstand the Horde's attack. After all, before the Alterac kingdom entered a state of total war, the regular army only had a mere 4,000 people. Among them, there were only 500 cavalrymen. If the video provided by Duque was real, the Alterac kingdom did not have the slightest chance of withstanding the Horde's attack, even if it was just a Horde army coming from the hinterlands. At this time, Duque suddenly added fuel to the fire. If the Horde comes from the hinterlands, who can the Barov family rely on? The Riptide fortress that is busy defending the bridge? The Dalajan that is practicing isolationism? The Lordaeron that is thousands of miles away? Or the 50,000 Stormwind elite soldiers that have experience fighting against the orcs in South Shore? Chapter 206. If it were not for Duque's video and the orcs' bloody battles, Duke Barov would have scoffed at Duque's 50,000 elite soldiers. In this era, the so-called rumors always had too much of an exaggeration. 100,000 soldiers? It would be good enough if there were 30,000 soldiers. Of course, the nobles and generals of this era were also used to counting peasant soldiers who had little fighting power and would go to the battlefield with pitchforks. They even counted auxiliary soldiers who helped transport food. After feeling the threat of the orcs so clearly, Duke Barov's view of Duque and the Stormwind behind Duque changed greatly. Encountering such a terrifying and organized barbarian race who could protect so many citizens and elite soldiers, Duke Barov felt that it was a miracle. Duque saw that Duke Barov was tempted. A very sincere smile appeared on Duque's face. Of course, this is only a possible future. There is no absolute certainty that the Horde will come from the hinterlands. But, Duke, don't you think that selling food in exchange for my personal friendship with Stormwind, His Majesty Rin, and me is a very good deal? At this time, Duque raised 3 fingers. On behalf of Stormwind, I propose to purchase 5,000 tons of wheat at a premium of 30% over the current market price, and it will be paid in Arather gold coins. At the same time, as a symbol of personal friendship, I can unconditionally transfer the exclusive rights of the New Pearl Line in the Hilbrad Hills and Arather Highlands to you." Duke Barev's expression was one of shock. Duque was too smart. 5,000 tons was exactly the total amount of the Barev family's old wheat. Duke Barev wouldn't believe it even if he was beaten to death to say that Duke didn't secretly gather intelligence. In this era, storage technology was also quite bad. Even if the grain was stored in a cool, dry cave, it would rot in at most 3 years. Of course, Duke Barev knew that as refugees, it was good enough to fill their stomachs. But 5,000 tons of old grain in exchange for a large amount of money and Stormwind's friendship was not a bad deal. Prince Barev could not think of any reason why he should refuse, either from a commercial point of view, or as an insurance for the future. Duque stood up and stretched out his right hand. "Dear Duke, for the future of the Stormwind people, and for the future of all humans in Azeroth, please agree to help." As a best actor, as a leader who was likely to control the future of humanity, Duque's smile was very sincere, at least on the surface. Duke Barev and his wife looked at each other and sighed deeply. They stood up together and extended their hands to Duque. "Even though I still have many doubts about the strength of the Horde and the direction of their attack, even though I am not a prophet who can see the future, I choose to believe in you, the person who created such an atmosphere in order to successfully negotiate. But the tribe is getting stronger every day. The Griffin Knights and spies I left on the other side of the sea have discovered that the Dark Portal has been reopened. Large numbers of orcs continue to pour into this world, but the King of Rotterdam refuses to meet us. And that stupid Duke, he looks at us like we're beggars." Lothar couldn't control his temper. King Lang put down his exquisite teacup. A king who has lost his kingdom is indeed no different from a beggar. "Andoin, we need to be patient." "Patience? Our enemies are increasing their troops crazily, and our people are starving in South Shore. To hell with patience." At this moment, the only remaining Morningstar court mage who had been guarding Lang suddenly opened his old and muddy eyes. "Your Majesty, the latest news is that Duke Marcus and Duke Barev's negotiations have been successful. He has already reached an agreement with the Barev family and purchased 5,000 tons of wheat at a premium of 30% over the market price." Chapter 207. A 30% premium? That bastard from the Barev family. I'm going to kill him. Lothar's anger was almost bursting through the sky. "Calm down. Andoin, calm down. The people in South Shore are the citizens of Stormwind, not Alterac citizens. No kingdom, including Rotterdam, can provide for hundreds of thousands of refugees without compensation." After Lang poured cold water on Lothar's head, Lothar finally calmed down. "How's South Shore now?" Noxus did not ask the Morningstar wizard this time, but another attendant. At this moment, a letter from a Griffin Knight arrived. Lang and Andoin opened the letter, and found that it was from Duke Bolvar for Dragon, who was in charge of guarding South Shore. "Your Majesty, I know you have been concerned about the situation of the citizens in South Shore. I'm here to report the latest news. In fact, the situation of the refugees is improving rapidly. More than half of the refugees have moved into wooden houses. Mr. Edwin Van Cleef, who is in charge of building the houses, seems to have adopted a method of building houses called molding from Duke Marcus. Although the houses look the same, it can prevent our people from being exposed to the sun and rain in a short period of time. The new temporary palace has been built. It's on top of a hill at the edge of South Shore, and you can overlook the sea. His Highness William is very fond of the new 2-story stone palace. The merfolk under Sir Marcus have started to chase a large number of fish to the coast. I saw with my own eyes that as long as they cast a net on the shore, they will definitely be able to catch fish. I have to say, this is a miracle. It would be even better if we could get food from the Barev family. That's because the food collected from the Western Wilderness and Rotterdam can only last for 2 weeks at most. Although I don't want to admit it, I have no place to interfere in the civil affairs. Sir Marcus's arrangements are perfect, and my interference will only make things worse. The only problem now is that the people are pessimistic about the future of the country. Sir Benedict has tried his best to appease the people, But unfortunately, the effect is not great. The worst thing is that we lack food, necessary equipment, and a clear military goal. The morale of the army is at its lowest. After reading Ballwald's letter, Lang heaved a long sigh of relief. Bolvar and Benedict did their best, and I can't blame them for anything. Lang put down the letter. Indeed, Benedict is a good man, but not a capable one, Noxus said. In fact, Archbishop Benedict of Stormwind City was also a good friend of his. They had known each other for more than 20 years. On the contrary, our little Duque can always surprise us. I almost forgot that he's actually a mage and not my assistant minister. Lang showed a rare smile. I think we should give little Duque more power and more responsibility. Don't be fooled by his appearance. Their focus was only on the simplest and most simple things such as clothing, food, housing, and transportation. Saving them from the brutal beastmen could naturally gain their gratitude for a while. But for the people to truly recognize him, it would take long-term efforts to at least meet their basic needs. Duque did it. He not only used his fleet to save hundreds of thousands of Stormwind citizens, but he also built South Shore into a holy place where there was no hunger or cold, and there was not too much suffering. On the way here, not a single refugee had died on the way, and not a single citizen had shown a look of despair. Duke used his miraculous methods to stop the collapse of the building. In the eyes of the people, compared to King Rin, who lost his country, and Lothar, who was constantly defeated, Duque was the real hero. Salute our hero, Sir Duke Marcus. An unknown officer shouted. A second later, it was a tsunami of 100,000 soldiers and civilians shouting in unison. Long live Sir Duke Marcus. Chapter 208. His voice even startled the Queen and the Prince, who were gazing into the distance outside the new palace. Mother, is that Duke Marcus's horse team? Why do I feel that Duke Marcus is more popular than father? William asked his mother, slightly confused. This question made Bolvar, who was at the side, break out in cold sweat. The Queen smiled apologetically at Bolvar, and then educated the little prince. William, you must remember, only those who give their people a good life are true heroes. Since ancient times, why are so many heroes who have defeated evil beings praised and remembered by people? The key is that they fight for the people. Fight for the people? Yes. They protect their people and let them live a happy life, so they are heroes. Not only did Duke Marcus defeat the demon king Sardras, but he also defeated the attacks of the orcs many times. He used his fleet to save hundreds of thousands of people, and let them all live a life of food and clothing. So Duke Marcus is now a hero in the hearts of the people. The Queen patiently guided the little prince. Why do I hear the servants talking bad about father? They say that he is a king who lost his country or something, and not a hero. The Queen didn't mind. Instead, she continued to guide William. That's because the people blame your father for the fall of Stormwind City. Don't take it to heart, William. One day, your father will take back Stormwind City and become the great hero in your heart again. Also, as a king, you should never be jealous of the achievements of your subordinates. Just like how your uncle Anduin is more famous than your father, there is no point in comparing. The glory of a hero can never overshadow the glory of a king. Do you understand? Yes. At this time, Duque's horse team had already arrived outside the new Stormwind Palace. The Queen brought the prince to meet Duque. Duque didn't expect the Queen to say, "Thank you, Duque. You are so outstanding. It's a pity that William doesn't have an elder sister. Otherwise, I would definitely let you marry into the royal family." This sentence almost choked Duque to death. Although the royal family would occasionally use marriages to win over their important ministers, Duque never thought that this would happen to him. Fortunately, Varian had no sisters. I'm actually still young. Don't look at me like this, I'm only 15 years old. Duque stammered. Duque also felt that it was a blessing in disguise. Originally, Sardra's curse had turned the young Khadgar into a small old man in history. However, with the help of the soul of Mediva's father and Lothar, and the fact that Mediva's counterattack came faster, he only aged a few years. Not only did he look more mature, But he also found that he had grown a lot taller after staying in Karazhan for a while. Now he was about 1.8 meters tall, which made him look like a young man in his 20s. The queen nodded lightly and said, marriage with the Bara family can indeed solve our current problem, but it's not ideal. Firstly, it might provoke the Alterac royal family. Secondly, I feel that Duque's achievements are not limited to this. A duke's daughter is not suitable for him. Bolvar immediately gave the second candidate. In fact, since Duke Marcus is a wizard with boundless prospects, and most of his assets are at sea, there is a very suitable candidate. Princess Kurtiras, Her Highness Jaina Proudmoore, only 12 years old, is currently studying magic in the Dalajan. That's indeed a very suitable candidate. If we want to counterattack Stormwind City in the future, we can't do without Kurtiras' help. However, she seems to be close to Prince Arthas of Lordaeron and Prince Kuel Salis Kale, that Sunstrider. The queen frowned. I see. That depends on the situation. Do you have any other recommendations? Bolvar shrugged. If we don't consider the Duke, then it can only be His Majesty Menethil's beloved daughter, Her Highness Kalia. Her age is very suitable, 15 years old. Because Stormwind City didn't send any reinforcements to the Westmoreland, Old Man Garion was furious. So, he put on his battle robe again and called upon the people of the Westmoreland to form the Westmoreland People's Army to fight against the Defias Brotherhood. After the fall of the Brotherhood, Varian returned. Then came the Northern Expedition. Stallman's People's Army also participated in the Northern Expedition and received a regular army, renamed the Moon Creek Brigade. Garion himself also returned to the military system, and his title rose. After the Northern Expedition, the old man returned to his hometown with the Westmoreland People's Army. But not long after, the Great Cataclysm happened again, and the remnants of the Brotherhood rose again. Just like that, Grion Stallman managed to climb to the position of Marshal after repeated struggles. Anyway, Duque knew that Garion was a super powerful person. Now, the Marshal of the future generation said the second sentence. Duke, I've talked to your follower, Mr. Van Cleve. I think we can open up a battlefield in the Westmoreland, break the Orcs' control over the Westmoreland. In the future, we can prepare for His Majesty Rin's counterattack against Stormwind City. Duque spat out water. He really spat it out. He spat out the water he just drank in front of Van Cleve and Stallman. Even though he turned his head, he still spat it out. What the hell was this? This pair of gay friends who loved and killed each other in history actually told him that they wanted to join forces to open up a battlefield behind enemy lines in the Western Wilderness? Van Cleve, did you know that Stallman was the one who issued the mission to behead you in history? Duque could not stop cursing in his heart, but after thinking about it, he immediately understood Stallman's reason. Duque pretended to take out a handkerchief and wiped the corner of his mouth. My apologies, I'm being rude. I didn't mean to mock you, I just happened to think of something. Van Cleve and Stallman both lowered their heads and counted the non-existent ants on the floor, pretending that they did not see the scene of Duque spitting out water. Duque was now a big shot who had to deal with thousands of affairs every day. The fact that he took the time to meet them was completely due to Van Cleve. Stallman, who was now just a small local sheriff, of course did not dare to say anything. He could only keep his doubts to himself. Duke crossed his fingers and placed them under the tip of his nose, covering half of his face. He had a serious expression on his face. Please note that His Majesty Rin has issued an edict before he went to Lordaeron to seek reinforcements. In order to deal with the possible further invasion of the Orcs, all Stormwind troops are now being reorganized, and they are forbidden from leaving the Hillsbrad Hills. Alright, I want to hear your reasons. The real reasons. Chapter 210. Duque agreed. Even though he still needed bandits in the future, they would need to be powerful ones. Van Cleve was definitely not up to the task. There were many things he needed to make in the following days, but there was nothing that required Van Cleve's skills. Those who truly needed Van Cleve's skills would have to wait until Stormwind City was rebuilt. Duque had always believed that talent should not be wasted. The two were overjoyed to see Duque agree. They looked at Duque expectantly, waiting to see how much support Duque would give them. Duque cleared his throat. I cannot go against His Majesty's orders. So, Garion, you must give up your position as sheriff and become the commander of my private army. No problem. Garion was willing to do anything for the people of the Westfall wilderness. Edwin, you're still new in this field, so you'll be Garion's assistant. Understand? Understood, master. Edwin nodded. Duque pressed his hands on the table and put on a serious expression. As a form of support for your work behind the enemy lines, I'll allow you to recruit 3,000 experienced volunteers in South Shore in my name. I'll pay each of them 2 gold coins in advance. Remember, you are not allowed to recruit soldiers from the Stormwind army. If Duque had done this before the Dark Portal incident, he would have been asking for trouble. But now, it was completely different. Among the 50,000 elite soldiers who had withdrawn from Stormwind City, less than half of them were active soldiers. The rest were the private soldiers of various nobles, militia, and even warriors who were born as ordinary citizens. They had experienced the orcs in the past, so they were definitely experts. Both of them heaved a sigh of relief at Duque's words. This was a great support. I can also transfer 3 Bloodsail warships to you as your personal supply ships. But remember, I don't want you to launch too many attacks against the orcs in the first 3 months. You'll be courting death before the orcs' main force invades the northern continent. Also, Duque opened the map and pointed at Moon Creek Town in the western wilderness. I know there's a Moon Creek mine here, and I knew that in the deepest part of the mine, there was a huge hole in the sea that could be used as a secret dock. Therefore, I hope that you will use Moon Creek Town as your base and turn the Moon Creek mine into the Beastman's Death Mine. I said it, I really said it. Ha! Looking at Van Cleef and Stallman's worshipful gazes, Duke's heart was filled with joy. Ha! I can't believe I taught the boss of the Death Mines in the history to go to the Death Mines and trap the orcs. I'm such a genius. Ha! Duque laughed in his heart. He laughed proudly and wantonly. Van Cleef, on the other hand, had a look of realization on his face. 70 meters tall, and had a head of black hair that reached her ears. She wasn't as beautiful as Aurelia, but she still had 80 points. The sturdy dumpling was at least a C cup. Beneath the linen shorts was a pair of long white legs. Note that she was only 13 years old, and still had room to grow. According to the trend of history, she definitely wouldn't be disabled. Duque coughed. From now on, I'm your master. Yes, Master Marcus. The little girl called out reluctantly, her eyes red, as if Duque had forced his father to sell her here. Duque was embarrassed. Just help clean the room and then learn more combat skills. I don't need a pure maid. Okay, you can go now. Yes. The little girl left, and before she left, she gave her father an extremely aggrieved look. All right, Edwin, come back once every 3 months to report on your work. Also, remember that your master is from MI7, don't get too close to him. If it wasn't for Mediva's betrayal, would there have been an orc invasion after the Dark Portal was opened? Would there have been so many problems? Why do the entire human world have to clean up the mess you caused? The representative of the Alterac Kingdom followed suit. Enough. Don't you dare insult Mediv. It's obviously the Demon King Sargera's plot. If you continue to insult him, I don't mind challenging you to a duel as Mediva's best friend. This time, even King Lang couldn't take it anymore. As a childhood friend of Lang, Mediva's character was definitely noble. After knowing the truth, Lang also tried his best to protect the reputation of his childhood friend. Even after Mediva's death, Lang continued to work hard for this. Now that this guy had publicly slapped Mediva's face, wasn't this also slapping Lang's face? Since Lang was so tough, that guy finally kept quiet. But there was still no progress in the meeting. At this time, a young mage who had just appeared beside Lang that day and was ignored by the representatives of the various kingdoms had a mysterious smile on his face. Chapter 212. 1,000 years of peace had brought about many things. For example, prosperity and numbness. The bustling life in the city made everyone like flowers in a greenhouse that could not withstand any wind and rain. Once a gust of wind called orcs broke the glass window of the greenhouse, they would wither or even wither. In the history, even if Lothar made a shocking concession and sacrificed the glory of his ancestors, he personally admitted that the era of great Emperor Thoradin was over, and he acknowledged the royal authority of the kings. It still took more than 3 months to complete the integration of the alliance. It was only after the orcs bypassed the Stormguard kingdom's Soderbridge defense line and invaded the hinterland of the various kingdoms in the northern continent from the sea that the kingdoms came to their senses. Note that the kingdoms here did not include the Rotterdam kingdom. The Rotterdam kingdom, which had the strongest economic and military strength, was almost the last to be attacked because of its geographical location in the north. For a long time, the Rotterdam kingdom was in a state of local war. They would just spend some money and troops, and then it would not affect them. The nobles sang and danced, and watched the beasts fight. When the battle at the front line was at its most intense, the bastard nobles even went to the Tyrrhena's kingdom every day to complain that Lothar was a vampire, which consumed too much of their taxes and manpower. What Duque wanted to do was to awaken the lion. Even if it was old, it was still a lion. Lang and Anduin glanced at Duque. They did not know what Duque was up to, but Duque must have done something. It was because Duque had said that he would use a new method to stimulate a certain king's nerves. What the hell was this new method? Lang and Anduin felt that something was amiss as soon as they heard it. However, they still acquiesced to Duque after the negotiations were not going anywhere. The representatives of the various kingdoms did not stop criticizing the Stormwind. The representative of the Gilnea's kingdom pointed at the head of the frozen chief, Blackhand, and mocked King Lang. "You said this is the head of the chief of those green-skinned monsters? Maybe this guy is a little big, but who can prove that this is their leader? Didn't you say that they were all intelligent monsters? Why would their leader come to you and let you chop off his head? Stop joking, no king would easily stand at the front lines. Why would the beastmen, who clearly have the upper hand, send a great chieftain for you to kill? You!" Noxus was enraged. He had risked his life to kill Blackhand. Now it was actually reduced to worthless? Duke, however, stopped Lothar and turned to the representative of Gilneas with a smile. "How about this? The army of our Stormwind kingdom will go to the battlefield at the same time as your army. You can take this big head and shake it in front of the tribe. Let's see who the green-skinned creatures will chase." The Gilneas representative suddenly stood up, wanting to ridicule Duque, but at this time, something happened. Just yesterday, before Duque and his entourage arrived at Lordaeron City, an unfamiliar slave trader presented a batch of special gifts to Menethil II and requested an audience with the king. Everyone knew that the king of Lordaeron would not simply meet with a slave trader who came out of nowhere. If it wasn't for the fact that the slave trader's gifts were good enough, even a person of status would not have appeared. In the end, it was a Viscount of Lordaeron who received the slave trader. The merchant repeatedly told the Viscount who met him that this batch of goods needed to be injected with a tranquilizer made from the peace bloom as the main medicine every 12 hours. Otherwise, the existing restraints and cages would not be able to hold them. The slave trader even sent a formal notice in the form of a document through formal diplomatic channels. This slave trader was obviously someone's subordinate. However, as someone expected, the slave trader's reasonable request was ignored, and all of the slave trader's warnings were ignored. This was the arrogance of Lordaeron, the most powerful of the 7 kingdoms. Arrogance was also a common problem among the nobles of Lordaeron. More than 1,000 years ago, it was the ancestors of these arrogant nobles who transferred their property to the more prosperous Lordaeron region, leaving the descendants of Thoradin the Great to die in the ruined Rapidstream Castle. No one would have thought that more than 1,000 years later, they would also pay a terrible price for their arrogance. After this point in time, the Lordaeron kingdom would perish because of the arrogance and stubbornness of King Tyrrhena's. Duque had no intention of stopping this, but the Lordaeron kingdom was still extremely powerful at this point in time, and Duque did not mind using the arrogance of the people of Lordaeron to make them suffer a little. Dang dang dang. The alarm that symbolized the invasion of foreign enemies had not sounded for 1,000 years in this pure white city that was also regarded as a holy city by countless people. When the loud and shrill alarm rang, no one in the entire Lordaeron kingdom reacted. Almost everyone was stunned for more than 3 seconds. Only the most dutiful guards realized after a few seconds that it was AF * King Alarm. All of a sudden, the entire Lordaeron was in an uproar. The representative of Gilnis, who was about to scold them, was stunned. As the leader of this place, Menethil II, who thought that he was the noblest among the 7 kings, could not help but be furious. His white beard flared up, and he stared at his servant with his old eyes. "Quickly go and find out what happened. Why did you sound the alarm?" The trouble was at the arena. In this era of lack of entertainment, bloody and exciting gladiatorial competitions were the most attractive entertainment, second to none. There were countless gladiatorial arenas of all sizes in the entire northern continent. Just like Thrall, who was the son of the chief of the Frostwolf clan, Durotan, Thrall was picked up by a human after Durotan was assassinated by the assassins of the Shadow Council. After that, Thrall was raised as a slave gladiator for a long time. On the surface, the entire Lordaeron kingdom did not care about the invasion of the orcs. In fact, the slave gladiators of the orcs were definitely in high demand and were the most popular goods in the Lordaeron kingdom. A healthy orc slave warrior could be sold for more than 10,000 gold coins recently. Be it the nobles of the Lordaeron kingdom or the black-hearted owners of the gladiatorial arenas, none of them could resist this temptation. There were 100 orcs, and they were all elites of the Blackstone clan. There were even a few personal guards of Blackhand. In order to collect these orcs, someone had put in a lot of effort. After the effects of the mind-calming potion on the orcs wore off, they heard a voice. It was in the orc language. This voice told them that the head of their chief was in the highest castle, and it was being wantonly humiliated and displayed by the humans. Revenge! 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 Driven by their frenzied thoughts, the orcs easily broke free from the iron shackles that were as thick as a human baby's arm, broke the iron bars of the cage, and charged out. Chapter 213. Impossible! The managers of the Colosseum, who dealt with ferocious monsters all day long, and the guards responsible for watching over the slaves, were all stunned. The humanoid monster in front of him was beyond the scope of human imagination. Despite the mysterious merchant's repeated warnings, the guards saw the burly bodies of these orcs and still imprisoned them according to the standards of the trolls. In their opinion, even 2 giant demons wouldn't be able to break free. They were wrong. Beastmen were already stronger than trolls, let alone berserk beastmen who had drunk demon blood. Following a roar that shook the entire arena, 100 berserk beastmen broke free of their cages and charged towards the light. Each and every one of these men, who would definitely be strong and powerful compared to humans, were like children in front of them. The long whips used to punish the slaves would only make them more ferocious. The gigantic fist smashed into the faces of the scarred and ferocious-looking guards, and the abundant power easily smashed everything it came into contact with. His cheekbones instantly collapsed, followed by his temples and lower jaw, and then his entire skull collapsed. Before the human cervical vertebrae could support or cushion the impact, the violent force had already shattered the entire skull. Yellow, white, red, all sorts of colors dyed the walls of the Colosseum, which must have been dyed black with the blood of countless slaves, into the colors of the abusers. More guards heard the news and rushed over. They brought the best equipment they could. However, it was useless. These berserk orcs could set off a bloody storm with just a punch or a swing of their arms. By the time the orcs came back to their senses, there was no one alive in the basement except for the orcs. The inexplicable voice seemed to be guiding them, and they seemed to feel the unyielding anger of the great chief, Blackhand, roaring. Lochnaresh! The leader of the Blackhand guards shouted, ordering the orcs to arm themselves. They quickly gathered all the heavy weapons they could find, smashed open the door of the arena, and saw light. Lochtaroger. He would rather die than win. In this unknown country filled with humans, in this place where enemies were everywhere, the glory of the tribe and the violent demon blood in their bodies drove them to charge towards the tallest and most magnificent building. The city guards were alerted. They rushed over upon hearing the news and saw a group of peerless monsters with green skin. "Don't be afraid. These were orcs. Get into formation and surround him." Before the squad leader could finish shouting, a huge iron pillar that was thicker than a man's thigh had already swept towards them. The leader of the black-handed bodyguards used his unparalleled strength to teach these human warriors who had never fought against the orcs a good lesson. This lesson was called strength. The round shields that were neatly lined up in a row did not seem like shields at all. They were easily swept away by the heavy iron pillar in one breath. The sound of the iron shields exploding was mixed with the screams and wails of the city guards, deeply stimulating the nerves of every city guard behind them. Fear gripped their hearts easily. For a moment, even their hearts forgot to beat. Every dilated pupil reflected the horrifying figure that was 3 meters tall. It did not look like a living creature at all, but more like an ancient demon god. Ah! The first row of city guards whose arms were smashed into pieces let out a shrill scream. The second row of city guards was almost stunned. They paid with their lives for the momentary lapse in concentration on the battlefield. The muscles of the orc bodyguards swelled to the point that they were about to explode. With the strength of a giant, the long iron pillar that was swung out with all its might stopped abruptly within half a meter. Then, it turned around and swept again. Those who fell to the ground avoided the disaster. The second row of city guards who were stunned on the spot had their bodies sliced in half at the waist. The scene was so bloody that it easily destroyed their rationality. "I don't want to die." These city guards who could only bully gangsters and thieves on normal days suddenly lost their will to fight. They collapsed and abandoned their swords and shields, trying to escape from this terrifying shuraba in a fluster. Out of the gladiatorial arena was the first street of Rotterdam Kingdom known as Gladiator Street. This street that mainly sold swords and weapons had always been the favorite of the rich and powerful. Ordinary citizens were not qualified to enter this street. As a subsidiary industry of the gladiatorial arena, this street not only had a large number of high-quality weapons and armor that were far superior to the standard weapons, but also all kinds of rare equipment and accessories. A gladiator with a broken sword and a useless shield would not receive much cheers no matter how good his skills were. The rich and powerful who had gladiators would invest in their favorite gladiators with gorgeous armor and accessories. After all, this was where their pride was. Hence, the leader of the bodyguards found a huge skull of a 6-horned rhinoceros. This huge skull had already become extremely hard after being soaked in molten iron. Together with the 6 huge horns that extended forward, it was a terrifying piece of equipment that could attack and defend. The only problem was that this thing was too heavy. Even the troll slaves could not use it. But now, it all belonged to the bodyguards. Chapter 214. The shrill alarm was hurried and ear-piercing. As the king of the Rotterdam Kingdom, Menethil too could no longer sit still. He abruptly stood up, and the torch-shaped crown that was like a claw exuded a scorching majesty. "King Rin, as well as all the guests, please calm down. As the king of the Rotterdam Kingdom, I have the confidence and ability to protect your safety. Please wait here for a moment." After saying that, Menethil too waved his hand without caring about the reactions of the others, and a large number of royal guards immediately rushed into the large conference hall to guard the main paths. There were also mages who came in to set up defensive arrays. The commotion was so exaggerated that one could imagine how humiliated the Rotterdam Kingdom would be after this incident. The representatives of the various countries were either agitated or grumbling in their hearts. Their reactions were also rather interesting. Of course, the funniest ones were Lang and Lothar. The two of them couldn't help but look at Duque as if to say, "I knew it had something to do with you, kid." Duque shrugged and waved his hand, as if he was innocent. Lang rolled his eyes and said, "Who are you trying to fool? You've set 100,000 orcs on fire. You're the one with the most cunning ideas." Lothar was even more direct, and his face turned sullen. Being forced to a corner by the two big shots, Duque had no choice but to secretly make a 7 gesture. Okay, it was Lang's turn to remain silent this time. Lothar rolled his eyes. 7 referred to the 7th MI7. As an intelligence agency that belonged directly to the king, Lang didn't think that Duque had the ability to reach out to the 7th MI7. Needless to say, this was obviously a move by the 7th MI7, and as the head of the internal affairs of South Shore, Duque should be more or less aware of it. He seemed to have played a role. Lang was half right. If Lang went back to ask, he would get the answer that it was a plan planned by the 7th MI7. In fact, it was triggered by Duque. Because of Van Cleef, Duque found the master who taught Van Cleef the skills of a bandit. Duque bluntly pointed out that guy's identity. As a military intelligence agency, they had planted a spy around an important minister of the kingdom and were caught. This was undoubtedly a major failure. That guy's face also collapsed in an instant. How important was Duque now? In the army, there was even a saying that even if Lothar were to die, Duque should not die. Because these hundreds of thousands of exiled soldiers and civilians were now completely supported by Duque. Duque could review more than 1,000 reports and requests in an afternoon, and then he could multitask and write 10 different reports with 10 magic hands at the same time without making any mistakes. In fact, the system ALF helped to categorize and summarize the confidence. It seemed that the orcs had become porcupines, but the orcs still roared and charged forward like demons. The shield swordsmen with large shields were easily blasted away, and dozens of spears stabbed at the same time, but they were all swept away by a single stick. The orcs were simply monsters that couldn't be killed, which made the guards of the royal family tremble in fear. The only thing that kept these guards standing here was their glory and their determination to not retreat. However, the orcs had finally met their match. It was a priest who was emitting a white glow. To the guards' knowledge, such a guy who knew some kind of healing magic was similar to the shaman's healing magic. The guard didn't think that such a guy could stop him. He was wrong. He was ridiculously wrong. When he used the large six-horned rhinoceros skull to slam into it, the scene that happened below made him stunned. A hammer. A large silver hammer that was swung at high speed was mixed with a ferocious power that was no weaker than that of a chieftain, and it smashed towards the horned rhinoceros skull. With a loud bang, the horned rhinoceros skull that had smashed the carriages and destroyed the human shield formations one after another was easily smashed into pieces of various sizes by the hammer like a piece of glass that scattered in all directions. Without hesitation, the guard waved his right arm and blasted out the huge iron pole that he had pulled out from the arena. However, the strength of the other party was completely beyond his expectations. Clang dash. There was a loud clanging sound that was loud enough to make the surrounding guards cover their ears in pain. The guards' eyeballs almost popped out of their sockets. What did I see? The iron pole that was as thick as an arm was bent by the hammer. Chapter 215. What the hell is this? Is this still the strength of a human? The human in front of him was clearly wearing a clergy's robe, but he had a body full of strong muscles. Although in the eyes of Blackhand's bodyguard, humans were all weak creatures with thin arms and legs, this human was clearly stronger and more powerful than other humans. Without giving Blackhand's bodyguard any more time to think, the priest used his hammer to knock away Blackhand's huge iron pole. Clang! The huge iron pole that was more than 4 meters long turned into a stream of light and flew more than 10 meters away, stabbing into the wall of the snow-white palace that was more than 5 meters tall. Monster! I will punish you on behalf of the holy light. The young priest with a reddish-brown beard swung his hammer again. The huge two-handed war hammer was as light as a child's toy in his hands. The young man's golden beard fluttered in the wind caused by the hammer. So strong. This was the last thought that the guard had left in this world. Just like how the guard had killed the humans with violence, he was now being killed by the humans with the same violence. As the leader of the slave rebellion and the strongest among the orcs, the death of the guard dealt a huge blow to the morale of the orcs. To the young priest's surprise, none of the orcs retreated. Their eyes were red as they shouted, "Lok, Tar Ogre," which the priest could not understand, and rushed forward. The priest had no choice. Behind him was the palace of Lordaeron. Not only was there the king of Lordaeron, but there were also the king of Storm and other dignitaries. He did not know why the orcs would choose to carry out such a reckless attack that could not even be considered an assassination, but he knew that he could not let a single orc go. He could not count on the guards of the royal family of Lordaeron. He resolutely swung his warhammer and rushed forward with a fighting spirit that was not inferior to that of the orcs. The orcs were brave. They were natural war machines. Not only did they have stronger bodies than humans, but they also had stronger strength and faster speed. They also had a crazy fighting spirit. If he lost his weapon, he would use his fists. If his wrist was broken, he would use his feet to kick. If his feet were broken, he would use his teeth to bite. That priest saw with his own eyes an orc whose hands and feet were nailed to the wall by a pikeman not far from him. Taking advantage of the fact that a soldier went to check, the orc used his mouth full of fangs to bite off the soldier's neck. What a frightening creature this was! The priest could not help but be moved. With the addition of another priest who was also wielding a large hammer, the battle became even more one-sided. Not long after, all 100 orcs were annihilated. However, the price he paid was the lives of at least 500 Wang clan guards. This was not even counting the number of victims in the street of gladiators and the arena. King Tarina's Menethil, who had heard the news, arrived at the scene with a large group of guards. The horrifying scene in front of him almost made him vomit. The large number of dismembered corpses of the guards stung the king of Rotterdam's eyes. The king of the strongest human kingdom trembled, unable to speak for a long time. His wrinkled face looked a little old, but he was not yet 60 years old, so he was not yet senile. After a short period of extreme anger, Menethil too calmed down. Call King Lang and the other countries' representatives here. Although what happened today is a misfortune for Rotterdam, I do not wish for this misfortune to spread to all the human kingdoms. After giving the order, Tarina's noticed a priest who did not fit in with the royal guards. The priest was wearing a priest robe that only had the upper half of his body left, and the lower half of his robe was torn. He was also holding a large hammer. Not far from him, there was another priest dressed in a similar outfit. Looking at their blood-stained bodies, it was clear that most of the orcs' deaths were related to them. Greetings, two young clergies. Did you kill these orcs? Your Majesty, I only killed 55. Your Majesty, I killed 38. King Tarina's was stunned by the answers of the two priests. After a few seconds, he asked, May I know your names? I am Uther. I am Tyrion Fordring. Two priests carrying huge hammers bowed to the king of Lordaeron in unison. The scene was as weird as it could get. I admire your courage. As the king of Rotterdam, I announce that you will be rewarded. However, before that, I have more important things to do. I must first form an alliance with the other human kingdoms to fight against these hateful green beasts. At this moment, Tyrinas, who had been waiting to see what would happen, made a decision. The next report made Tyrinas even more certain of his decision. A duke, an earl, and a countess who was known as one of the top 10 beauties of Rotterdam were unfortunately killed on Gladiator Avenue. In addition, nearly 2,000 people, including more than 300 city guards and 600 Wang clan guards, were killed. And the reason was just the rebellion of 100 orc gladiators. Caught off guard, Rotterdam paid such a heavy price for a mere 100 green-skinned beasts. Just the thought of this made Tyrinas tremble in anger. If he did not do something, the nobles would not let him go. The people would not let him go either. Even though Tyrinas felt that something was not right, the threat of the orcs was real. If all the orcs on the other side of Sodder Bridge were so terrifying, then the Dalagan kingdoms in front of Rotterdam would not be able to withstand them. When the other human kingdoms were destroyed, the last remaining Rotterdam on the continent would not be any better. At this time, King Lang and the other countries' representatives arrived. Other than Lang, Duque, and Lothar, who had already experienced the war with the orcs, the other countries' representatives were all dumbfounded. Such a tragic scene left them speechless. At this moment, two messengers galloped into the palace, one in front and one in the back. Report, a large number of orcs have appeared from Loch Moden. They have already taken down the south gate of Danmorrow and are marching towards the Iron Furnace Castle. Report, more than 100,000 orcs have been spotted in the wetlands. They are expected to reach Sodder Bridge by tomorrow. These two pieces of news were like a bolt from the blue. The dwarves' representatives from the Iron Furnace Castle and the humans' representatives from the Riptide Castle were completely destroyed. Lang had emphasized more than once that the orcs' goal was to take over the entire planet. But all the representatives subconsciously thought that it was enough for the green-skinned beasts to take over Stormwind. When the day of all-out war came, they suddenly realized that the appetite of those damn orcs was terrifying. Chapter 216. Dang dang dang. The alarm that represented death and danger had actually stopped a long time ago, but the long ringing of the alarm still reverberated in the ears of every citizen of Lordaeron, every noble and every representative. This sound was a warning to the world that the peaceful days were gone, and the cruel and bloody war was coming. Without hesitation, the representatives of the various countries summoned mages and used expensive magic mirrors to transmit everything that happened in the capital of Lordaeron back to their own countries. The amount of magical gemstones needed to be consumed for such a long and large magic scene was shocking, but this time, no one was stingy with the money. In the reconvened meeting, every representative carefully watched the video of all the magic elements produced by Deity. Deity showed King Terenas and the other representatives the savagery and terror of the orcs with a huge cube with a side length of more than 10 meters. The unyielding primal madness. The bloodthirsty, cruel and terrifying killing. It was a berserk aura that said it would not rest until the last soldier was dead. Every scene brought a deeper shock to the representatives. When Deity played the images of the conquered lands at the end of the video, no matter adults, children, commoners, or nobles, everyone had to admit that this was a battle for the survival of their race. After the 5-minute demonstration ended, there was no other sound in the meeting room other than the sound of people gasping. Sir Marcus, can I save a copy of this video and send it back to my king? The one who spoke was the representative of Kultiras. Not only him, but the other representatives also expressed their desire to get a copy. I'm sorry, this is my unique magic technique, evolved from the inheritance of Medivh. I can't divide or transfer this magic, but I can demonstrate it again for all of you through the magic transmission. Seeing that the situation had been decided, King Terenas of Lordaeron stood up. He first looked at King Lang. All right, it seems that we have reached an agreement. Then, I will follow the request of King Lang Rin and officially send an appeal to the other 5 human kingdoms, as well as Kuel Salis and Iron Furnace Fort to form an alliance to fight against the orc horde together. I hope to meet with the kings or messengers who can represent the will of the kings in the throne room of Lordaeron within 2 weeks. In this era, it was never easy for a king to travel. If they traveled by land or sea, it would probably take the furthest dwarves more than half a month to reach the Rotterdam kingdom in the north of the continent. Everyone knew that the beastmen's attacks were like fire. Other than the kings who dared to play with teleportation portals, riding on griffins was the only option. In this era, teleportation was very unreliable. Mastering teleportation magic was no less than asking an ordinary person to pick the only correct sesame out of 100 pounds of black sesame from 10 meters away. Not only did they have to lock onto the exact coordinates, but they also had to make sure that the spatial state from the starting point to the destination was stable. Generally speaking, only those whose surrounding space had been reinforced by a large number of spells were suitable to be the end point. For example, the capital of magic, Dalagen, or the High Elves' Kuel Salis. In this day and age, the only ones who dared to play teleportation around the world without making any mistakes were Antonidas and the other 2 Breaking Dawn wizards. The matter was settled. Lang, Andoin, and Deity heaved a sigh of relief. After returning to the guest house, Andoin asked the Morning Star Mage to do a check to ensure that no one was eavesdropping. Then, he said to Deity seriously, I know the gist of the matter. It may not be appropriate for me to say this, but I still decided to say it. As a senior and a partner who has gone through life and death together, I have to remind you that it's best not to get in touch with the people from MI7. The intelligence agency that reports directly to the king has always been a forbidden place for all kings. Lang is a very open-minded person, and I know he won't mind. I can't guarantee, but William should be a good king. Speaking of this, Lothar seemed to be in a bad mood. Deity was like a fox that had gotten his way. He smiled and raised his right hand to swear, I swear, I will never use my schemes against my own people. That's good. Wait, You don't treat King Tyrrhena's as one of your own? Not before, but now I am. Hearing Duque's reply, Lothar was really speechless. At this time, Lang came in, and there seemed to be an unresolvable worry between his brows. What's wrong, Lang? Lothar seemed to be a little more casual when there was no one else in the room. No, I'm still thinking about something. It seems that the formation of the alliance is inevitable. But who will be the leader? Isn't it His Majesty Menethil? Lothar was stunned. Duque secretly sighed. Lothar was really too naive. October. The smell of autumn was getting stronger. Be it the growing ears of rice or the heavy fruits on the branches, it was a sign that this year's harvest was going to be good. The fact that the northern continent was able to reap a bountiful harvest in this year of war was a good result. The new fields near the refugee camp in the Hillsbrad Hills might also have a good harvest. Lang and Andoin walked over to pat Duque on the shoulder. It was simply unbelievable. If Duke hadn't acted first and asked for permission from the Barra family, if Duke hadn't stubbornly forced all the warhorses in the army to be pulled to cultivate the land, if Duke hadn't bought the cattle at a high price from all over the place, if Duke hadn't done so. This was something that was simply impossible to achieve. If there were no accidents, they would be able to harvest a batch of summer food at the end of the month. That alleviated the food crisis near South Shore. Although the 5,000 tons of food that Duque bought at a high price sounded like a lot, it was only enough for nearly 500,000 people to eat for 2 months. However, there was now a new saying in Hillsbrad that Stormwind was actually going to occupy the land. Damn it, have you ever seen a refugee farming an entire area? From the edge of South Shore to the foot of the Alterac Mountains, almost every inch of the plains had been cleared. Every wild wolf in the mountains was used as a sumptuous meal. The caves were full of snowmen. Now that the snowmen had been slaughtered, the caves were used to store food for the winter. However, the news that the various countries were going to form an alliance suppressed all the objections. On the 8th of October, a large number of dignitaries rushed to the Rotterdam Kingdom. The meeting that was hailed as the most important to establish the alliance was finally held. Chapter 217. Alliance. It was a word that made Duke feel very happy. Before transmigrating, Duque had never thought that he would witness this moment in history. The huge golden bell was rung, and the long iron chain pulled the gears and struck the bell, producing a melodious and pleasant sound that spread throughout the entire Rotterdam Kingdom. In the east, southeast, south, southwest, west, northwest, north, and northeast, the rich Rotterdam Kingdom laid out a red carpet from the city gate to the Rotterdam Kingdom's capital for the kings and representatives of the 8 kingdoms. Similarly, the soldiers of Lordaeron lined up neatly along the red carpet all the way to the capital. Walking on the red carpet on the streets of the capital, there were girls on the 2nd and 3rd floor of the tall houses on both sides, scattering beautiful flower petals towards the streets, forming a beautiful rain of flowers. The people of Lordaeron cheered, welcoming the kings and representatives of the various countries as heroes. King Lang Rin of Stormwind, King Aiden Pyrenod of Alter, King Jean Greymane of Gilneas, King Dalen Proudmoore of Kultiras, King Salas Trollbane of Stormguard, Riptide Fortress, Breaking Dawn Wizard Antonidas of the Dalajan Kirin Tor Tower Parliament. High Elves represented Senator Dalcan of the Silver Moon Parliament. Dwarves represented Prince Magni Bronzebeard of the Iron Furnace Castle. Because the Iron Furnace Castle was besieged by the orcs, King Madoran Bronzebeard could not leave, so he sent Magni, who was known as the King of Blacksmiths. Together with Muradin Bronzebeard, who was originally the ambassador of the Iron Furnace Castle in Lordaeron, Lordaeron now had 2 dwarven princes. It could be said that other than the High Elves, all the countries sent their highest-level leaders to attend. This had never happened in the past 1,000 years. In a sense, this also represented the strength of Lordaeron. The leaders of the 8 countries arrived together, and King Tyrrhena's did not care who he welcomed first. He simply waited in the throne room for the leaders of the 8 countries. The 8 doors of the Rotterdam Kingdom were all opened, and the leaders of the various countries entered the magnificent palace almost at the same time, stepping into the throne hall. In the tall and spacious Gothic throne hall, The arches and pillars that were covered with pure white reliefs were the most beautiful works of art in themselves. The master artist used the reliefs to describe the story of Thoradin the Great's pioneering for mankind and the building of Lordaeron. A huge 7-colored glass window hung at the top of the ceiling and in 9 directions. Sunlight shone in, and the entire vault was filled with colorful and beautiful colors. The orange rainbow light blended with the amethyst-like light, and the ruby light and amber light complemented each other. The entire vault looked incomparably gorgeous. Meanwhile, the lower half had the most scientific diffuse reflection system. Sunlight shone through the transparent, pure-colored glass windows and landed on the large stone balls suspended in the middle of the throne room. The light was then reflected onto every throne. This kind of warm and mysterious radiance made everyone feel a mysterious sublimation of their souls. He didn't make things difficult for anyone, nor did he look down on anyone. The 360-degree circular throne room was divided into 9 equal parts. Tyrrhena's Menethil too stood in front of the throne in the north. Tyrrhenas spoke as he watched the kings arrive in front of his seat. 2,800 years ago, in order to fight against a common enemy, the trolls, the human Arathor Empire and the High Elves' Kuel Salis Kingdom formed an alliance and established an eternal covenant. 1,200 years ago, although the Arathor Empire disintegrated for a better future, the human kingdoms were still united as brothers, and there has never been a war between the kingdoms. Now, we all have a common enemy, the orcs. I hope that this time, we can reach an unbreakable and powerful covenant that unites the humans, elves, and dwarves. Menethil II's official declaration was not very exciting, but at least it was flawless. After everyone applauded, the kings and representatives sat down. Let me first report on the situation at Riptide Castle. Magni Bronzebeard's loud voice sounded first. The dwarves were known for their impatience. For example, the dwarves used fishing rods. How about it? That didn't sound like a problem, right? The problem was that this so-called fishing rod was actually a gun. What? You use fishing nets to fish in the stream. The dwarves shot at any fish they saw in the shallow water, and all the fish died. If they could blow up fish, they would not fish with nets. If they could kill fish, they would not fish. The dwarves' temperament was obvious. Magni waved his hand, and the specially invited Dalajan mage immediately used a magic mirror to show the fierce battle at the gate of Iron Stove Castle. In this world where swords and magic were the core, the dwarves' black technology was only second to the gnomes and gnomes. In the dwarven main force, there were dwarven cannons like mortars, dwarven steam tanks, and so on. Didn't it sound like a completely mechanized army? The problem was that the orcs were King demolition workers. An orc warrior spun a huge 4-meter-long iron pipe, thicker than a human leg, like a windmill. The dwarves relied on the mountain's terrain to make the 5 to 6-ton steam tank charge down the narrow mountain path. Unexpectedly, the berserk orcs swept it horizontally, and it exploded at the foot of the mountain. When the dwarves fought against the orcs, they were not much weaker in terms of strength, but in terms of size, they were at an absolute disadvantage. The orcs swung those heavy weapons and smashed them down. In the crowded battlefield, the dwarves who had nowhere to hide could only take the hits. The result was that the two sides repeatedly fought on the mountain path in front of the Iron Stove Castle's main gate. The dwarves only fired 1 shot a minute or so, but it was very powerful. The orcs also threw stones unreasonably. Not just the orcs, but there were also the figures of larger, more terrifying strength and endurance of the ogres in the tribe's formation. The dwarves had suffered heavy losses. Turning off the live stream, Magni slapped his hand on the handle of his custom-made and slightly less luxurious dwarf chair, giving Tyrrhenas a fright. Iron Stove Castle urgently needs reinforcements. What we need most are priests and medicine. Also, those damned green dwarfs ruined our farmland. Our entire autumn harvest is ruined. We also need a lot of food. The dwarves were just that straightforward. They needed food. They needed medicine. Tyrrhenas had to remind Magni, we are now discussing the threat of the Horde. We need to confirm the need to form an alliance first, then discuss how to support each other and how to deal with the Horde. Alright, then let's form the alliance. Where do we seal it? With that, Magni took out a royal seal that was very characteristic of the dwarves, the hammer in his hand. The human kings were all speechless. Chapter 218. King Salas Trollbane of Stormguard spoke. The Solder Bridge was also under heavy attack. Thanks to King Stormwind Lang's valuable experience, we did not suffer too many losses. After saying this, he also played a live video. The situation here was much better. The orcs could not pass through the huge straits with strong winds and strong waves, so they could only attack the narrow Solder Bridge. Unlike the dwarves, where the horde could climb mountains, the orcs only had two bridges that looked wide during normal times, but felt narrow during battles. 30 meters wide sounded like a lot. The terrain in the northern continent was slightly higher, otherwise, why would it be called the Earthy Highlands? However, they had to withstand the firepower of more than 100 ballistae and catapults that were deployed along the mountain to the north of the bridge, as well as more than 30 arrow towers and 1,000 javelin team members who hid in the blockhouses in shifts day and night. 30 meters? That was a target, all right? No matter how brave the orcs were, they would only be cannon fodder. If this bridge had not been made by the dwarves and was extremely sturdy, an ordinary bridge would have collapsed long ago. Thus, the Stormguard people only sacrificed manpower and resources, not lives. King Salas did not forget to give King Lang a grateful look when he played the video. Without Stormwind's full set of javelin manufacturing blueprints, the warriors of Riptide's stronghold would probably still be fighting the orcs with useless bows and arrows. Not only blueprints, but a large number of craftsmen had also come to help Stormguard make the javelins while teaching the craftsmen of Riptide's stronghold. The alliance had not yet been officially established, but Stormwind was already doing its part as an ally. Moreover, before today's meeting, Duque had already made it clear to King Salas that if Riptide's stronghold needed help, his 7,000 private soldiers could go to the Earthy Highlands at any time. Of course, Salas Trollbane did not know that according to the situation, he would not have the opportunity to use such reinforcements. And it just so happened that Duque knew this, which was why he had come to offer his help. Salas had been greatly frightened by the orcs, and now that he had such a loyal ally who promised to help him for free, Salas was so touched that he almost cried and snot flowed out of his nose. If he knew that Duque turned around and muttered to himself, "It feels so good to be able to increase favorability by making a promise that doesn't need to be fulfilled," he might even want to kill Duque. Of course, these were all assumptions. With the orcs as their enemy, as well as the support of the craftsmen from Duke Stormwind Duke Marcus, Stormguard was definitely a country that responded positively to the alliance. However, it was relative. Apart from the Rotterdam kingdom that had just been slapped in the face by the orc slaves, the kings of the few countries that were closer to the north behaved rather indifferently. This was especially so for the representative of the High Elves, Councillor Dalcan of the Silver Moon Parliament. This fellow was actually admiring his newly manicured nails. Lang and Andoin could not help but frown. Why are these guys still observing at a time like this? Andoin was the most direct. He secretly kicked Duque and whispered, "Don't you still have information to submit?" Duque rolled his eyes at Lothar, and finally raised his hand. "I, Duke Marcus of Karazhan of Stormwind, have important information to submit." Those who could attend the meeting, even if they were standing behind the king, were all important ministers of the kingdom. King Tyrrhenus nodded. "I agree to submit." In the history of the alliance, one of the biggest losses was that the leaders of the various countries had initially thought that the orcs did not know how to build ships. Now, what Duque submitted was an image that he had personally sent Darnielle and the search team of 3 ships to retrieve. The huge mirror showed the scene of a group of orc laborers working in full swing. Although the work of these crude fellows was completely unsightly, it could still be clearly seen that it was the keel of a ship. This time, the one who reacted the most violently was King Kurtiras, Dylin Proudmoore. He stood up from his throne and stared at the image with his bulging eyes. If the orcs had a large fleet, Kurtiras would have nowhere to escape. It could be said that apart from Duque's fleet, Kurtiras had no other reinforcements. That was not the end. Duque continued. "This is the image of Baradin Bay in the northwest of the southern continent. It happens to be separated from South Shore by a sea. As everyone knows, we, Stormwind, have a fleet of more than 100 warships, more than 10,000 murlocs, and hundreds of Naga. Even without Kratira's fleet, we dare to say that we can defend South Shore. However, there is nothing we can do in other places. In the center of the 7 thrones and the 2 representative seats, in front of the huge map of the Eastern Kingdom, Duque let a hand of magic float gently on the map. From the Baradin Bay to the west, around South Shore, to the north of the land. At this time, it was King Zeon of the Gilnea's kingdom's turn to look bad. Of course, King Terinas of Lordaeron was also in a bad mood. Because near the finger of Duque's hand of magic was the North Stream coast, which was convenient for landing. What was the coast? Wasn't it Lordaeron's silver pine forest? At this time, Duque said seriously, "Of course, this is just a guess." Maybe. The direction of the hand of magic changed. This time, it went east from Baradin Bay, all the way under Sodder Bridge, to the southeast of the northern continent, and then north along the Cape. This time, it went over the steep Arthi Highlands, which was full of elemental creatures, and pointed further north to the east coast of the hinterlands. This time, it was King Alterac's turn to look bad, but his reaction was not too intense. Is it there? That's even better. Let those damned trolls fight the green-skinned monsters, Eden argued. What if those trolls joined the tribe? Duque asked back with a cold smile. Eden was very, very unhappy with Duque's questioning. Then at least those dwarves from the Eagle Nest Mountain will be at the front. As soon as Eden's voice fell, Dwarf Prince Magni was not happy. Hey, King of Alterac, watch your tone. Those are our dwarven brothers. That's right, brothers who fight and kill each other. Eden shot a disdainful glance at Mag. Bastard. Even after the War of the 3 Hammers. But we've made up with the Wild Hammer dwarves. I'm warning you, don't insult our Wild Hammer brothers again, or I'll not let you off. Magni waved his hammer angrily. Eden snorted coldly and answered with silence. It was a sign that he did not want to pursue the matter further. Beside Magni, Muradin Bronzebeard, who had been an ambassador for many years, was more tactful. He pulled his brother back. Duque glanced at King Eden. Although he quickly retracted his gaze, Noxus still saw that moment of disdain. That was the look of disdain when looking at a dead man. Duque's deduction based on the orc's shipbuilding ended here. If it wasn't for the heavy atmosphere, Lang almost wanted to applaud Duque's wonderful deduction. In any case, Duque had successfully established the common foundation of the entire alliance. Chapter 219. As a transmigrator who was familiar with history, Duque had a huge advantage at this moment. He did not want to cheat a certain race with long ears, but he knew very well that some members of the alliance could not be invited and were in a hurry. It did not matter if it was out of arrogance, or that this country was a scum. In any case, he would never mention this possibility. After all, the biggest difference on the Horde's side had already appeared, Lord Howl's groom Hellscream. Since Lord Howl was here, then the Warsong clan that was supposed to stay in Draenor was likely to appear. No, it was very likely that they had already appeared, on the other side of the Sodder Bridge. It was just that the ones attacking the bridge now were unknown small clans, so there was no way to confirm it. Since Ghoul Dan had reopened the Dark Portal, then the clans that were supposed to stay might appear. For example, the future Lich King Nizul's Shadowmoon clan, or Kargath Bladefist's Shatterpalm clan. There were more than 10 famous clans. Now that the Blackrock clan was heavily injured, any reinforcements were possible. For the final victory, Duque had long decided to drag down more of the original allies that belonged to the alliance. Duque retreated after he finished speaking. King Terinas of Lordaeron raised his head slightly. All right, everyone, do you have more information about the evil orcs to share with the kings here? The surroundings were silent. If not, I suggest that we start voting now on whether to form a strong alliance to fight against the evil orc tribe that is bent on conquering the entire world of Azeroth. Please note that we are now discussing the formation of a military alliance. Every country that joins the alliance has the obligation to help each other. They can either provide money, manpower, or directly send troops. Countries that refuse to join will not receive help from the alliance when faced with the Horde's attack. Alright, that's all I have to say. Those who agree to join this alliance, please raise your hand. Originally, the atmosphere was very good. From Lang's point of view, with this momentum, forming an alliance was a sure thing. No matter how one looked at it, it would be a matter of course, and all 9 countries would join the alliance. Lang was a little excited just thinking about it. As long as the alliance was formed, would the 9 countries not be able to defeat the Horde? Taking back Stormwind City and rebuilding the foundation of his ancestors depended on this. Who knew that at this moment, Magni's loud voice could be heard again. Hey, wait a minute. Have any of you agreed to help the Iron Forge? Without any reinforcements, just relying on the dwarves in the southern continent to hold back the orcs? Is this what you mean by helping each other? King Tyrrhena's looked displeased. The dwarves were always so direct. He had to interrupt Magni Bronzebeard. Since we are forming an alliance, we will definitely help each other. What we need to do now is to set the framework, and then decide how to assist, how to coordinate. The dwarf prince, whose beard was so long that it almost reached the ground, showed his straightforward nature. No, I hate to hear the official terminology of you humans. We dwarves are very direct. Is there any help? When and where? Quantity? Personnel? If they can really provide us with enough aid and support, we, the Iron Stove Fort, will join. If not, then I won't waste my time here. I'll hurry back and kill a few more beastmen. Magni's shameless extortion made all the human kings frown. At this moment, more than one king had his own plans. As a country that had already been attacked, the beastmen were not people who would stop until they succeeded. The dwarves would not give up their own capital. If that was the case, even if the humans did not help, the dwarves would fight the beastmen to the death and drag down a large portion of the beastmen's forces. In a split second, more than one king was prepared to abandon the dwarves. In history, they did the same. In fact, this was not a very nice thing to do, and it caused a few countries in the alliance to appear united, but actually divided. In the original process, the dwarves only officially joined the alliance when the humans attacked the wetlands and broke into Dan Maluo, saving the dwarves who had been bitterly defending for a long time. But Duque was here. Enough! Duque suddenly shouted. Since you dwarves see the alliance as an exchange of benefits, then we can do it, seeing that we have a common enemy. In 3 days, Stormwind's fleet can reach the deep waters southeast of the wetlands, Blackwater Moor. We will give you 10,000 peacebloom and silverleaf flowers, 20,000 heathergrass, and 5,000 setback grass. In exchange, we need 15,000 fine steel longswords made by the dwarves. If you don't have them, you can use the standard dwarven battle axes instead. Anyone with a bit of common sense would know that these were low-grade alchemy materials, used to make low-grade healing potions. In a war of this level, high-grade materials were not used much, because high-grade alchemists were needed, and the production would decrease. In contrast, low-grade materials were more useful, because alchemy apprentices had a lot of them. Finished products were hard to get, but getting potion materials was definitely a pleasant surprise. Magni was stunned that Duque was so well prepared. Iron Stove Castle did need help, but Magni was putting more pressure on the newly formed alliance. He did not expect the humans to have any preparations. In his imagination, it would take at least half a month to prepare. He only wanted a more specific promise from the human kings, so that he could confirm whether the humans wanted to use the dwarves as cannon fodder. But Duque had undoubtedly outmaneuvered him. This was a meeting of the kings, and Duque would not make empty promises. Either Duque was the biggest liar, trying to trick him into joining the alliance on behalf of the dwarves. Either that, or the Stormwind Kingdom had really made ample preparations for this war. It was obvious that the Stormwind Kingdom had come prepared. Stormwind, who was eager to destroy the orcs and restore their kingdom, would not trick the dwarves on such a matter. Magni froze, and his expression turned from anger to joy. It was ecstasy. The dwarf prince was also shameless. No, it should be said that he had no shame or integrity to speak of. He immediately apologized. Sorry. My heart was filled with thoughts of my brothers and sisters in Iron Stove Castle who were injured and unable to receive treatment. I was too emotional. I should not have doubted you humans. Lang had no idea that Duque had done so many things. Lang knew that Duque would never lie to him about such things. He stood up. Prince Magni Bronzebeard, as long as we join the alliance, we will be brothers in life and death. I can promise you that Benedict, the Archbishop of Stormwind, will be willing to lead the priests to our brothers in the alliance to help heal our allies. Chapter 220. The Archbishop of Stormwind. This was a huge bet. Lang had always been known as a wise king. As the dwarf kingdom not far north of Stormwind, Magni obviously trusted Lang more. As for Tarinas, who was full of official words but had no substance, Magni raised his hammer. I represent the Iron Furnace Castle's bronze-bearded dwarves in joining the alliance. Tarinas was not happy with Magni stealing the spotlight, but he would not make things difficult for the dwarves. After all, it was not his Lord Darren that had pledged their support. Then let's vote. The Stormwind Kingdom agrees. Ryan almost rushed to express his opinion. Everyone knew that Stormwind, which had lost its capital, was the most miserable. There was no point in pretending to be in a hurry. It was better to be the leader and promoter. King Dallin and King Salas spoke at the same time. Kultiras agrees. Stormguard agrees. At this moment, for countries had already agreed. As long as the leader of the Lordaeron kingdom agreed, the alliance would be formed. At this time, the calm King Tarinas raised his hand. Lordaeron agrees. As the strongest human kingdom among the 7 major human kingdoms, the Rotterdam kingdom's approval was expected. Be it out of respect for their status as the leader of the various kingdoms, or as a response to the chaos caused by the orc slaves a few days ago, the Rotterdam kingdom had to join. And with Lordaeron's participation, the remaining Dalajan, Gilnis and Alterac who were slightly hesitant also joined. At this point, the 7 human kingdoms and the dwarves had all joined. All the kings and princes looked at the lowest-ranking representative in the throne room, Kuel Salas, member of the Silver Moon Council, Dakin. Faced with dozens of burning gazes, the handsome high elven mage raised his long eyebrows, took a sip of the best black tea produced by the Rotterdam kingdom, and then said in a nonchalant tone, "I'm not interested in the matter." After discussion between the Silver Moon Council and His Majesty Anastrian Sunstrider, Kuel Salas will not join this alliance. But as a symbol of our friendship with the humans, we will give you the necessary assistance. Not joining the alliance? Give the necessary aid? Such arrogant and cold words were clearly saying, giving aid to you humans is completely a form of dog food that we're giving you. This time, a few kings stood up angrily and glared at Senator Dakin. To everyone's surprise, it was Magni who opened fire. Long ears. Aren't you afraid that those green-skinned creatures will take a big detour to find trouble with you first? At this moment, Duque secretly bared his teeth. Damn, you guessed it? That's right. In history, it was the orcs who had gone around half of the northern continent and went straight to Kuel Salas to find trouble with the high elves. However, Darkin did not seem to mind at all. As if he had been struck by Duque's 7 deadly sins, he retorted, "The magic of the high elves isn't something dwarves like you can imagine. Kuel Salas had the perfect magic defense system. You don't have to worry about our safety." With that, Darkin actually stood up, turned around, and left. Gone? He really left? This was no longer a slap to the face of the Lordaeron family, this was a slap to the face of the entire alliance of 8. For a moment, a few kings even had the urge to declare war on Kuel Salas. After all, the human kings were not tribal chiefs. They did not become bosses just because they were good at fighting. Their rationality still told them to calm down. However, the group of kings told themselves that if something really happened to those long ears, they should just let them die. Duque, who was beside Lang, was a little puzzled. As a transmigrator and a veteran player, he remembered most of the history. Why didn't the High Elves attract so much hatred in his memory? Well, no matter what, the alliance was still established as Duque had imagined. After that, there was nothing for Duque to do. As the mastermind, Duque had temporarily completed his task. The rest of the matters, such as distribution of military supplies, coordination of military operations, and intelligence gathering, had nothing to do with Duque. Naturally, the one who argued with the king was the king. Although Lang really wanted Duque to be by his side to give him ideas, Duque's words choked Lang to death. "I'm sorry, Your Majesty, I still have 1,300 reports and documents to go through. If I continue to stay here, this number will double tomorrow. I don't rule out the possibility that there will be casualties among your citizens and soldiers during the winter due to various reasons not being handled in time. After all, South Shore is near the Alterac Mountains, and the winter here is much colder than in Stormwind City." Lang had no choice but to let Duque go back to the state guesthouse. Back at the state guesthouse, Makarov opened the door for Duque. As soon as Duque opened the door, he saw his little maid, Vanessa. Duque had originally wanted to be a bit more corrupt and had Vanessa wear a very modern black and white lace-made outfit. Then, the extremely independent Vanessa ignored the orders of the Duke of Karazhan and the Sky Mage Duke. She removed all the fancy lace on her own. The low-cut front lapel was removed, and it became tight. Her black dress was also so long that it almost reached her ankles. Don't even think about cat ears or anything like that. Alright. This was the maid outfit of this era. Duque wanted to say something more, but Vanessa snorted and turned away, not even looking at Duque. Duque would not go so far as to kill a 13-year-old girl. He just wanted to look good. It was not against the law. Sob. Forget it, the more I say, the more I cry. The bitter Duque buried his head in the sea of reports and documents. The ruler of Lordaeron continued to explain in a low voice. Every king wants to deal with their tribe's problems on their own. At the same time, they are very reluctant to see another king enter their territory. Sir Lothar, you are not a king, and your position is not high, so they don't think you can gain anything from this. On the other hand, the nobility of your bloodline is enough for them to not think that they will be looked down upon by other kings. After thinking about it again and again, Lothar finally nodded. All right, I accept the position of commander of the alliance. Lothar's voice had always been loud, and his acceptance made many kings heave a sigh of relief. Tyrrhenas raised his head and arms. Then, I declare that all disputes in the Lordaeron alliance are over. We will fight side by side, just like our ancestors did in the Arathor Empire. After confirming that every king had nodded, Tyrrhenas continued, now, the only one who is suitable to lead our army, the one who inherited the bloodline of Thoradin the Great, Sir Anduin Lothar, has agreed. So, the kings of the alliance hereby announce that Sir Anduin Lothar, the general of Stormwind City, will be our supreme commander. The armies sent by each of our kingdoms must listen to his orders. Those who disobey will be punished severely in the name of the descendants of Arathor. The last obstacle to forming the alliance was finally cleared. As Tyrrhenas's voice fell, the throne room, which had been noisy for several days, was finally filled with thunderous applause. Perhaps this was the roar of applause because they had a common enemy. Perhaps it was because they had the same bloodline. No matter what the motive was, it was not important. What was important was that this marked the reunification of mankind after thousands of years of division. It was not only the humans, but also the dwarves. This pan-human alliance had finally shown its sharp claws and teeth to the invaders. The 13th of October, the first year of the Dark Portal. It was the dawn of the day, and the morning fog covered the land as usual. The citizens of Lordaeron, who were still sleepy, stretched and started a new day of activities. Perhaps they were preparing to harvest food, or preparing to open their shops. Although they could not see the first rays of dawn, the people in the city knew that a new day had arrived. The light fog enveloped their beautiful brick and wood houses, and also covered the wide streets of the capital with a thin layer of gauze. Even so, this was still the beautiful Lordaeron that they were familiar with. Everything in their sight, the sounds in their ears, and the calm atmosphere of the city, everything was the same as before. But the next moment, as the messenger cavalry shouted along the street, everything was different. They shouted as they galloped. This was a method of spreading news that was only used when there was news of victory. It had been many years since the citizens of Lordaeron had encountered this method. Yes, the last time was when the heir of King Tyrrhenas, Prince Arthas, was born. On this day, every citizen of Lordaeron heard this news. In order to deal with the increasingly rampant orcs, Lordaeron, the 7 human kingdoms, and the dwarf kingdom of Cosmodon have formed a pan-human alliance, the Lordaeron Alliance. The leader of the alliance will be King Tyrrhenas Menethil II of Lordaeron. The supreme commander of the alliance will be the direct descendant of Thoradin the Great, the noble Sir Anduin Lothar. All allies must send troops, money, and manpower for Lothar to use. The most revered Archbishop of the Holy Light, Alonso's Fail, announces that the Lordaeron Alliance is the representative of justice. The Church of Holy Light will join the alliance in the form of a church, and give every soldier of the alliance the blessing of the Holy Light and supreme courage. Within 3 days, this news spread like it had wings, and the entire world of humans and dwarves was excited. Chapter 222. In fact, many things happened on the 12th of October. Firstly, Lothar's military rank was set as the Grand Marshal of the Alliance. In order to show respect to the descendants of Thoradin the Great, the kings who joined the Alliance army were all admirals. Hence, there were the magical military ranks such as Admiral Lang Rin and Admiral Dalen Proudmoore. Since Duque controlled over 100 warships and 7,000 private soldiers from the previous Bloodsail fleet, he had 2 military ranks, Vice Admiral of the Alliance Navy and Brigadier General of the Army. As for how to unify them, Duque solved this problem during the banquet that night. That's right, the banquet. It was a once-in-a-millennium event for so many human kingdoms to unite. The Lordaeron Palace held a grand banquet that night. The nobles who didn't have the chance to come out all came out. Those who were qualified to enter were at least earls. Of course, earls and marquises were not qualified to go and have fun if they weren't dukes who commanded the army. Coincidentally, Duque was the star of the alliance, the inheritor of Mediv, the killer of Sargeras, the leader of the 100,000 tribes, the youngest sky mage, the Duke of Stormwind, and the owner of a large naval fleet. No matter which one it was enough to make Duque the center of attention. King Dalen had long black hair that smelled like seawater. His long and curly mustache made him look very masculine. One could tell from his well-defined face that Dalen was definitely a handsome man when he was young. Not long after the banquet started, he brought his eldest son, Drake, to Duque. Duque and Lang exchanged glances. Of course, Lang knew why Dalen came. In fact, Lang didn't understand Duque's decision. However, Duque's foresight was far better than his, so Lang agreed with Duque's decision in the end. Hello, Duke Marcus. As partners who are going to conquer the ocean and feed the orcs to the fishes, don't you think we should have a good chat? Dai Lin raised his crystal plate full of wine and touched it with Duque's plate. The two looked at each other and smiled. Then, Duque raised the plate towards Prince Kultiras to show his respect. Then he, Dalen, and Drake downed the wine in the plate in one gulp. Actually, I'm very envious of you mages. You used powerful magic to easily seize a fleet. You should know that it would take at least 3 years even if all the shipyards in Kultiras worked day and night. Duque smiled but did not say anything. Your Majesty proud. You're not thinking of asking me for the fleet that I obtained from the Bloodsail pirates, are you? Don't underestimate me. Even though most of those guys are from Kultiras, since you didn't get them from Kultiras, they are your spoils of war. Even if my men don't like them, as long as they still have the insignia of the Alliance on their ships, they are still our comrades. King Dalen was obviously a heroic man of the sea. If this was the era of the universe, he would be the overlord of the universe who said, "My journey is the sea of stars." Normal people would find it hard to dislike such a straightforward man, unless they were his enemies. Duque smiled. It was just as straightforward. Not only that, but there was also a kind of holy light in his smile. No matter who saw it, they would think that he was a selfless saint. That's right, Duque inherited the moral integrity of Mediv. According to the system notification, moral integrity divines skill, hypocrisy. because the humanity you obtained is far beyond what you should have. If you let this part of humanity temporarily control your body, you will become a holy existence in the eyes of the world. You will be more like a saint who serves the public for the sake of the world. All beings of the non-evil alignment will believe you more easily. Duque opened his mouth. He didn't even deliberately lower his voice. No, actually, I want to say that I will be more at ease if my fleet is handed over to His Majesty Daylin, who is an expert in naval warfare. Daylin and the Drake father and son were stunned. They almost doubted their ears. Not only them, but even the surrounding nobles who were listening to their conversation were stunned. Daylin frowned. Duke Marcus, actually, I didn't mean, I know, but after serious consideration, this is the best choice to maximize the combat power of the Alliance's navy. In fact, I have also discussed this with His Majesty Rin, and His Majesty also supports my decision. As soon as Duque finished speaking, King Lang also walked over and nodded to Daylin with a smile. Duque continued, I may be a genius, but only in the field of magic and strategy. I am a novice in naval warfare. Over 100 warships can only be used as transport ships in my hands, but in His Majesty Proudmoore's hands, it is an unparalleled weapon that can send thousands of orcs into the sea to hell. If it weren't for the fact that the final control of the Nagas and Murlocs is in the hands of my master, I would even be willing to give them to your Majesty to command. Please don't shirk this responsibility. This is for the Alliance. Lang, who had thought it through, was extremely open-minded. As soon as Duque finished speaking, a commotion quickly spread out with the four as the center. There were murmurs of admiration around them. This was what it meant to serve the public, and what it meant to look at the overall situation. Which king didn't have their own plans for forming the alliance? Daylin was definitely very envious of Duque's fleet. In private, he had complained to his son more than once that Duque recklessly wasted God's resources. Now, he said, for the alliance. A fleet of over 100 warships was transferred just like that. What kind of internationalism was this? After all, if Daylin was sinister enough, he could completely wipe out Stormwind's hard-to-come-by assets. With Duque being so magnanimous, Daylin's small complaints had long since flown out of the atmosphere. Daylin raised the wine plate that the waiter had filled for him and said loudly, "Did everyone hear that? Lieutenant General Marcus is willing to transfer all the warships to me, Daylin Proudmoore, for the alliance." The aristocrats said in unison. Since His Excellency Marcus is willing to make such concessions for the alliance, then I, Daylin, cannot fall behind. I, Din, hereby swear in the name of Thoradin the Great's collateral descendants that I will not mistreat the fleet that His Excellency Marcus gave me. Even if Kurtira's first fleet is wiped out, I will not let His Excellency Marcus' fleet be wiped out. The uproar spread like ripples and quickly spread throughout the banquet hall. Everyone applauded. They praised Duque and Lang for their magnanimity. What the alliance feared the most was that the kings would be secretive and unwilling to send out their main force. In the end, Lothar was likely to become a lone commander. Now, it was clear that Duque had made a good start. With Duque taking the lead, presumably the other kings would be too embarrassed to send out their ugly second-line troops. Chapter 223. When Duque announced that he would be donating 1,000,000 Arather gold coins on behalf of Stormwind, the entire banquet hall was in an uproar. Perhaps one could say that Duque was putting on a show, but it was still a show. When Makarov brought his men to the plaza outside the banquet hall and opened the chests to show everyone the shiny gold coins, the entire hall was left with nothing but awe and admiration. Duque did not give the money to anyone else, but to the Archbishop of the Church of Holy Light, Alonso's Fail. A long time ago in the Dalajan, a Lordaeran missionary threw a copper coin into the fountain and made a wish. I hope that one day I can spread the way of the holy light to every commoner, and teach them the meaning of the three virtues. This missionary was the Archbishop of the Holy Light, Alonso's Fail. His footsteps covered every city on the continent, and his name as the Saint of Mercy had long been recognized by the entire continent. It was no exaggeration to say that he was the synonym of justice and holiness in this era. Duque said sincerely, "I believe that the Archbishop will distribute the funds fairly." Every king was willing to believe in Alonso's character. All of a sudden, the losses caused by the invasion of the horde did not seem to be too painful. What did 1,000,000 gold coins mean? Among the 7 kingdoms, this was already the annual income of a mid-tier kingdom. For example, a small mountainous kingdom like Alterac only had a few 100,000 gold coins in their treasury. Of course, this had to do with the fact that the king's territories were poor, while the Bara family was extremely rich. The only ones who could easily take out 1,000,000 gold coins were courtiers, who traveled all over the world as a merchant, the inhumane mage kingdom of Dalaran, and the Rotterdam kingdom, which had the most fertile and rich land. Now, Duque's act of sending money after the fleet was like adding fuel to the fire. All of a sudden, the pretentious souls of the kings were awakened. Courtiers, 2 million. King Delin, who had just received the benefits, raised 2 fingers. The Dalajan speaker, the old man who read Tycoon and wrote Antonidas, smiled and raised 3 fingers. Since the small countries below were acting tough, the king of Lordaeron, who considered himself to be the #1 fighter in the world of acting tough, raised his palm. Hiss! After the nobles gasped, they naturally burst into thunderous applause. An astronomical figure of 11,000,000 gold coins. Just thinking about it made his whole body tremble. But if you thought about it, you would know that Tyrrhena's was very smart. It was because the Rotterdam kingdom would definitely send out the most troops. If nothing went wrong, he would be the one who would suffer the most losses. In fact, it was very likely that the money would end up in the hands of the Rotterdam kingdom. But it didn't matter, the effect had been achieved. Originally, during the meeting, they hadn't decided how many troops each clan would send. As the commander of the alliance, Lothar had to discuss these matters one by one. This was the public relations of the banquet. Lothar didn't expect Duque to put on such a good show, which greatly lightened his workload. Archbishop Alonso struck while the iron was hot. For the future of mankind, for the future of this world, it's a good thing that the countries have the money to contribute and send their troops, isn't it? Of course, as the leader of the alliance, I announce that the first batch of troops from the Rotterdam kingdom will be led by Duke Alexandros Mograine, and his deputy will be General Abendis. The first batch of troops will be 100,000. 100,000 troops. How bold was that? It was definitely the most exaggerated standing military force among the kingdoms that had yet to enter a full state of war. One had to know that Stormwind City, which originally had 20,000 to 30,000 regular troops, now had 50,000 elite troops. Of course, the war potential of the Rotterdam kingdom was far more than that. The other kings who couldn't afford it were embarrassed. King Salas of Stormguard said loudly, "The earthy highlands don't need any knights for the time being. Chief Commander Lothar, you will see the Highland Knights of the Torrential Fortress within a week." King Xeon of Gilneas said in a low voice, "You will see the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd Infantry Regiments of Gilneas." At this time, King Eden of Alterac, who had always been experienced and tactful, couldn't keep his face any longer. "The Eagle Knights of the Alterac royal family will be under your command within a week." Chief Commander Lothar. Knights and cavalry were 2 different concepts. Even though they were both riding horses, knights were much more superior than cavalry. Every knight had to start as a poor knight candidate. They were usually servants who followed official knights to learn horsemanship, combat, etiquette, and other knowledge. Then, they had to prepare a warhorse and a set of armor. Don't underestimate a set of armor. A qualified knight's armor, unless it was passed down from generation to generation, was not something that ordinary people could afford even if they worked hard for a lifetime. If it was before Duque's transmigration, it would be equivalent to preparing 1 million RMB. Note that this was only the price of the armor, not the horse. Not just any horse could be used as a warhorse. Ordinary horses could not possibly bear the weight of a few hundred kilograms of armor and human. It was not cheap for a warhorse to bear such a weight and charge at high speed. If converted to RMB, it would be more than 500,000 renminbi. Basically, at a glance, any standing horse that was less than 1.7 meters tall was not a warhorse. So, raising a knight regiment was equivalent to raising at least 5 infantry regiments. These knight regiments were the treasures of the various kings and were rarely seen. The Gilnea's kingdom lacked horses, so they directly pulled out their main infantry regiment. When Antonidas told Lothar that there would be a group of 200 mages led by one of the 6 members of the Kirin Tor Council, Lothar was grinning from ear to ear. He gave Duke a thumbs up. "Thank you, child. I see a holy light in you. You have a beautiful heart that shines brighter than gold." The next moment, when Alonso's wrinkled hand touched Duque's shoulder, Duque's entire body emitted waves of gentle platinum light. This was the effect of Duke inheriting the moral integrity of a certain mage god. "Ah, child, I didn't expect that apart from your amazing talent in the path of mystery, you also have unparalleled talent in the path of holy light. If one day, you can't continue on the path of mystery, the Stratholme Cathedral's door will be open for you." Awkward. What an awkward situation. So, after inheriting Mediva's moral integrity, I can become a holy priest. Duque thought that as a modern transmigrator, even if he became a priest, he would only be a shadow priest. This feeling was really like a dog crying. Not only Duque, but the other nobles were also pointing at Duque. No one thought that Duque, who burned 100,000 orcs to death, had the heart of a saint. Chapter 224. Of course, Duque did not have high hopes of becoming a divine archpriest. There were as many bosses as there were stars in the sky. He did not know when he would die twice, and he would lose his integrity. Hence, Duke was very touched by Alonso's invitation, but he refused to accept it no matter what. At this time, King Dalin came up and patted Duque's shoulder. "Forget it, Archbishop Alonso's. I think a good guy like Duque should not be a saint. The world needs him," and Dalin suddenly smirked. Duque suddenly shuddered. It was a bad feeling. Sure enough, Duque was shot in the next second. Actually, if Duque is willing to use his fleet as a betrothal gift, I am willing to betroth Jaina to him. Not just Dalin, even his brother-in-law, Drake, who had a black forehead, said, "I'm told that you look mature, but you're actually only 15. My sister is only 12. Duque almost choked on his own saliva and ran to his corpse. Forget it. In the history, Jaina sold her father and caused the death of her father and countless rumored boyfriends. Even if I can resurrect, I can't handle it. Duque decisively shifted the blame. I'll pass. I don't want to piss off Prince Arthas. At this moment, the 12-year-old Jaina had already shown her potential as a beauty. Arthas, the unlucky childhood sweetheart, was head over heels for her. A little later, she would attract the heart of Kale, that's the Prince of Kuel Salis. Oh, if it's a fair competition, I won't say anything even if my son loses. Terenas walked over. Duque continued to change his target. Haha, I don't want to be the public enemy of the Dalajan stars. That's strange. Isn't it natural for explorers of the mysterious path to seek a partner with the same magical talent? Archmage Antonidas came over to make up for it. Duque cried in his heart. You guys, why are you so obsessed? Do you think you're the aunties of an illegal matchmaking agency? Duque stuttered. At this moment, all of these old and sly fellows could see that Duque had an inexplicable resistance to the name Jaina. Dai Lin was magnanimous. He laughed and patted Duque's shoulder. It's all right. Perhaps you will change your mind after you see the jewel of Kultiras in my house. Terenas waved his hand. Kalia, come here. His father. A generous and gentle voice came, and the bones of the surrounding young nobles all softened. Kalia Menethil was the second in line to inherit the throne of Lordaeron. She was the elder sister of the famous Arthas in the future, and she had a good relationship with Arthas. It had to be said that Princess Kalia had inherited her mother, Queen Leanne's beauty. She had a quiet, oval face, extremely exquisite and noble features, and soft golden hair that cascaded down to her shoulders like a waterfall. When Kalia, who was wearing a white dress, walked gracefully in front of Duque, intentionally or unintentionally showing off her exquisite figure. Everyone around could not help but gasp in admiration. What a perfect beauty! She was only 15 years old. If she became an adult, how beautiful would she be? Lothar whispered in his loud voice, "Damn, I almost want to marry again." This joke was met with a burst of friendly laughter. A faint blush appeared on Princess Kalia's face, but she still greeted him graciously, "Good evening, Duke Marcus." Lothar, this bastard, actually tricked Duque. "Hey, young man," the princess greeted you. "Don't you feel embarrassed if you don't give her a greeting gift?" For a moment, the surrounding nobles jeered. Gift, gift, gift. Anyway, everyone knew that Duque was a tycoon. Didn't the cunning Terinas want to more or less trick Duque? "Kid, at least give me 10 pounds of pearls, right?" Duque was actually poor. Although he did not care about money, there were hundreds of thousands of refugees, and he had come to Lordaeron to show off. He really did not have much money left. Because of the war, the nobles instantly tightened their purse strings. It was difficult to sell luxury goods for a high price now. Something like 10 pounds of gold pearls, Duque did not want to give it. Moreover, she was the princess of Lordaeron, the strongest of the 7 kingdoms. Would she care about this? Of all things, she could not lose face. Duque gently waved his mage cloak. He was just short of saying, "Get out of my way, I'm going to show off." Then, Duque made his move. During the days of training in Karazhan, although Duque did not create an ice circuit that was comparable to the arcane fire magic circuit, but there was still a small circuit of ice magic. Duque pointed his finger, and the wine in the waiter's hand suddenly flew into the air. As Duque's left index finger moved nimbly, the wine suspended in the air actually started to spin. What kind of magical control was this? Duque's understanding and control of elemental magic was completely beyond the imagination of an archmage like Antonidas. The show continued, and a cold breath emerged from Duque's palm. Crystal clear ice petals formed in front of everyone's eyes. An ice rose made of ice elements? Under the brilliant light, every single ice rose petal could be seen clearly, layer upon layer, forming a blooming rose. Not only that, but there was also a faint flame flowing in the cold flower path and petals, flickering. Just this dreamy appearance alone caused the ladies in the audience to exclaim. At this moment, Duque was possessed. He did not know why, but he remembered some classic scenes from movies. He did a perfect hand kiss, imprinted his perverted pig mouth on the back of her snow-white and soft hand, and then handed over the rose of ice and fire that was enough to kill the heart of almost any girl. "Your Highness Princess Kalia, only the most beautiful rose can match the most beautiful you. I hope you like this little gift." With that, Duque retreated with great style. To be honest, Princess Kalia had seen all kinds of luxurious gifts, but she had never seen such a creative, high-end, and classy magic rose of ice and fire. Terinas turned his head slightly to look at his court archmage. The old archmage shook his head in shame. He was telling his king, "I can't do such exquisite magical control." On the other side, the princess was completely drunk. Her aqua-blue eyes stopped moving, and in her field of vision, there was only this beautiful dreamy rose. The flickering flame in the rose had attracted all her attention. She did not even know that her face was blushing so beautifully. You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.